Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 7 scary true graveyard horror stories, we cross the rusted gates of cemeteries where names are carved in stone, flowers wilt overnight, and the earth itself remembers what we try to forget. These are chilling tales of bells that ring when no wind blows, voices that whisper from cracked mausoleums, and footsteps crunching over gravel when you know you're completely alone. This is a brand new channel, and my goal this month is to gather 3,000 brave souls who dare to step into the darkness. Almost 90% of people who watch never subscribe. They vanish back into the shadows. Don't be one of them. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? And if there's a cemetery in your town that makes your skin crawl, type its name, because once you step past the gates of these haunted graveyards, some things don't let you leave. Kill the lights, silence the world, take a deep breath, and let's begin. I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do with it. If this gets taken down, that's fine. If you think I'm lying, that's fine too. I just want it somewhere outside my head. If anyone from Bangor reads this and recognizes some of the details, I'm not trying to drag the cemetery or the people who work there. They didn't do anything wrong. The wrong thing, if you can call it a thing, was already there. This happened in October of 2022. In Maine, I was back in Bangor for a few weeks to help my sister, Maya, clear out our dad's house. He worked for the city most of his life. Dispatch, then records, the kind of guy who kept old scanners in the den, and a shoebox full of keys to buildings no one uses anymore. He passed the winter before, and we'd both been putting off going through his stuff. Fall felt safer, I guess. Cooler air, fewer memories. Dad used to tell these calm, matter-of-fact stories about the town. He'd mention a call that came in for a raccoon loose in the library, or the time a kid got stuck in a culvert and the entire neighborhood showed up with rope. No drama, he never embellished. So when he talked about Mount Hope Cemetery, the big one on State Street, with a certain careful tone, like he was setting a glass down, I remembered it. There's a light in there, he told me once when I was little. Shows up in fog. Old-time lantern, not a flashlight. Don't follow it. It's not for you. At the time, I thought it was his gentle way to keep me from wandering off. Later, I figured it was one of those town legends. We've got a few, but I hadn't thought about that light in years. Not until I was back in that house, and the night started smelling like cold leaves and wet stone, and all the talk on the local Facebook groups turned to spooky season tours and fog advisories. Maya wanted to get the whole job done fast. She's practical like that. She brought her boyfriend, Ben, who's the kind of guy you trust to carry a heavy dresser without complaining. The three of us fell into a rhythm. Mornings at the dump, afternoons boxing up the den, nightly depressurizing at this diner on Broadway where the pie is always a little too sweet. We laughed more than I expected to. It wasn't all sad. Sometimes you find a postcard your dad wrote in 1993 apologizing for missing a school thing, and it's so corny and sincere you have to sit down. The weird stuff started small. That's important. If it had hit like a sledgehammer, maybe I could write it off as panic or sleep deprivation. But it came in like fog. Slow, sideways, filling in the low places first. The first night I smelled kerosene in the den. Not gas, not wood smoke. Kerosene. Like the space heaters Dad used to keep in the garage. The windows were shut. The heat hadn't kicked on. I was alone in there, flipping through a milk crate of map books with those red plastic covers that used to live in every police car. I remember burying my face in my sweater because the scent made me queasy. When I told Maya, she shrugged. "Old house," she said, and opened a window. The second night, I took one of Dad's scanners down from a shelf. It's the clunky analog kind with the red LED numbers, the kind that clicks as it scans through channels. It wasn't plugged in. Out of habit, I flicked the switch. It lit up, I'm not exaggerating. The display glowed, the way it used to when he'd sit up late listening for storms. It made that soft stepping sound. I tapped the casing. The thing wasn't plugged in, and there were no batteries in the back. I checked. Still, the scanner hissed and then caught something, a thin voice crushed by static. I couldn't make out the words, just a rhythm, a pattern that sounded like Unit 14, Mount Hope lantern copy. And then it was gone. The screen went dark. I stood there with my hands on the dead thing like I'd made up the whole moment. When Maya came in with a box of Dad's bowling trophies, I asked if she'd turned the scanner on earlier to see if it still worked. She glanced at the unplugged cord. "No," she said, and then, "Don't look at me like that. You're freaking yourself out." Ben, bless him, tried to steer it into a joke. "If a ghost wants to help haul these boxes to Goodwill," he said, "he can use my truck." On the third day, we were supposed to do the garage, but it was one of those heavy-air October afternoons that drag you sideways. Fog built up from the river and spilled over the low streets. On impulse, I said, "Let's take a break. I want to walk at Mount Hope." I told myself it was just to clear my head. That was only partly true. Maya didn't want to go. She's superstitious in a practical way. She'll cross herself passing an accident just in case. But Ben was curious, and he knew someone who'd proposed to their fiancée under one of the big trees there. "It's pretty," he said. "A little walk won't kill us. Mount Hope during the day is beautiful. If you haven't been, it doesn't look like the horror movie version of a cemetery. It's a garden. It rolls and curves. There are ponds and birds and a view over the city if you know where to stand. Even with the fog shouldering up between the oaks, it felt normal. We passed a man walking a small dog in a sweater. We passed a couple in matching beanies taking photos against the red maple leaves. Every dozen steps there was a name you'd recognize from a street or a school or a bank. We followed the loop road and then cut off onto grass, letting the path pick us. I kept my hands in my pockets because the air felt like it would stick to my fingers. The fog wasn't thick yet. It made everything more private, like we were the only ones on an empty stage. At some point, the dog barks and car hums faded. I didn't notice when. I only noticed the quiet once a crow flapped out of a tree and I expected a sound but got none. There was a smell then. Cold, damp earth, yes, but threaded with that thin, oily note I'd caught in the den. Kerosene. I glanced at Maya. Her shoulders were bunched up around her ears. "Do you smell that?" I asked. "Don't," she said. That was when I saw it, a warm orange thing between stones, too steady to be a sun glare and too mobile to be a light fixture. It hung at about chest height, swaying gently as if someone were walking with it. For a second, my brain ran through the practical options. Groundskeeper, tour group, but there was no silhouette. No person shadow around it. No sound of feet in wet grass. Just the slow reach of light and the fog swallowing it. Ben tilted his head. "You seeing that?" "I'm seeing it," I said. Maya put her hand through my elbow the way she used to when we crossed busy streets. "We're not going toward it." I wish I could say I was brave or smart in that moment. I wasn't either. I was curious in the way you are when you smell smoke and can't help looking for the flame. I took 2 steps. The light backed away, just a little, as if it were adjusting to keep the same distance. "Seriously?" Maya said. "Come on. We'll just see if it's a person," Ben called, already angling toward it. "Maybe they need help." I knew the legend. Everyone in town knows it in some form. Old caretaker follows the lantern and is found the next morning by an unmarked grave, lips blue, whispering a name. I heard that when I was a kid, and my dad's voice went tight around the word name. The adult version of me wanted to prove that a glow in fog is just a glow in fog, that we make shapes inside emptiness to feel safer. We didn't chase it. That's not accurate. We just tried not to lose it. The lantern drifted ahead of us like a lure, never farther than a short throw, never close enough to examine. If we stopped, it stopped. If we took a step, it swayed as if in thought, then moved. We slipped between old stones and newer ones, between monuments and low markers whose names were softened away by weather. I tried to stay aware of the road so we wouldn't get turned around, but the fog thickened and turned the world into a room with shifting walls. "Hey," Ben said at one point, laughing without humor. "My phone thinks I'm in the river." He held it up. The map spun and spun, little blue dots skating in a circle. Maya's compass app showed nothing but an angry red N that wouldn't settle. "Let's just go back," Maya said. She didn't sound like she was asking. We could have. I keep replaying that. We could have backed away and chalked it up to swamp gas or a prank or our own excitement. But the lantern paused in front of a row of particularly old stones and lifted, as if held higher by an invisible hand, like someone saying, "Over here." There was a sound then, small and metal. A delicate clink like glass bumping a hook. I don't know why that got me. It's such an ordinary sound, but hearing it without the body of a person around it made my chest feel hollow for a second, like missing a step. Ben heard it too. He swallowed. "Hello?" He tried, which is what you say when you don't have a script. The lantern tilted. That's the only word for it. It tilted the way your head does when you're thinking about a question. The flame inside, if that's what it was, leaned and a glimmer slid along what looked like a metal cage. There was no visible hand, no sleeve, nothing. Just that bare little engine of light thinking it over. It drifted again, deeper between the stones to a part of the cemetery where the ground fell away and then rose in a slow, soft wave. The names here were old and thin and nothing like the names you see on storefronts. I felt the quiet widen. Somewhere a bird tapped a branch. The light stopped by a squat gray rock that was more fieldstone than headstone. Unmarked, tilted a little, as if the land were shrugging. The lantern held still in front of it, and then, this is the part I hated even while I watched it, it sank. There was no flare, no trick. It simply lowered at a calm, steady pace, as if a hand were carrying it down a step we couldn't see. The orange glow dimmed, becoming a bruise in the fog, and then it was gone, wiped like a streak on glass. We stood very still. I felt my breath and the small, huge thud of my heart. I heard Maya's coat whisper softly as she folded her arms tight. Ben shuffled and stopped at once like he'd stepped on something he didn't want to commit to. I don't know how long we stayed that way, enough for my ears to start listening hard and pulling in weird details. The quiet pop of moisture falling off a leaf. The soft thread of a car a mile away. The distant smack of a flag against a pole. Then I heard another sound. Air through a small opening, slow and careful, like someone trying to breathe calmly through cupped hands. It wasn't loud. It would have been easy to tell yourself it was ground settling or a small animal moving in the roots. I wanted it to be that, but it came from nowhere and everywhere, and it had a rhythm. It was under us. Nope, Ben said quietly like a prayer he'd just remembered. Nope, nope, nope. Maya touched my sleeve. We should leave. And that might have been the end of it. Except the breathing, if that's what it was, shaped itself. The sound bent, syllables trying to stand up inside it. It wasn't a language. It was a word. A name. It didn't come out clean. It dragged over the edges of the ground. I'm telling you what it sounded like to me, and I know that matters. It said my nickname. Not the one people use now. The one my dad used to call me when I was 5. A silly, shortened thing he'd use in the grocery aisle or on the bench at baseball practice. It said that. Broken in the middle and still, somehow, exactly right. I felt my back go cold as if my coat had fallen off. Maya made a small noise in her throat and jerked her hand off my sleeve as if she'd been burned. When I looked at her, she wasn't looking at me. She was staring down at the sloped ground with her mouth pressed into a white line. Later, when she could talk about it without shaking, she told me it didn't say my nickname to her. It said hers. Ben took a step back and stepped down instead. His heels sank. He swore and yanked his foot up, but the ground held. It wasn't mud. It looked like the same patchy, leaf-littered soil as everywhere else, yet the earth had him by the ankle. He swore again and pulled harder. The fog made the edges of everything oiled. We could see him, but it was like watching through dirty glass. Don't say your names again, someone said. The voice came from behind us, from the fog, from where the road had been. I turned too fast and almost went down. A man stood a few paces away, blurred by the white. He was older. Gray beard, knit cap, the kind of rubber boots every Mainer owns at least one pair of. A canvas satchel hung at his side. I had the instant, ridiculous thought that I should recognize him from the hardware store or the bank or my dad's retirement party. Don't say your names, he repeated, and stepped closer. His eyes were red-rimmed like he'd been up all night, but he looked at us like he'd been expecting to find us here. You walk out now. Don't turn your back to it. Don't give it your name, and don't let it behind you. You hear me? Ben yanked again and came loose with a grunt, stockinged foot wet and dirty. His shoe stayed under. He grabbed my shoulder to steady himself and stood on one foot like a kid trying not to cry. The ground where he'd been caught smoothed itself. I don't have better words. That's the only way I can say it. It smoothed itself. The man in the knit cap took 3 flat steps toward the little fieldstone and did something I couldn't completely see. He set his bag down and pinched a handful of something between his fingers. Salt. I realized, seeing the off-white crystals, and sprinkled it in a ring around the stone. Neat and practiced like he'd done it 100 times. He said a word under his breath. Not a prayer I recognized. More like a direction, a parent tone you use with a kid who's running. Okay, he said to us. Walk with me. Back up, eyes on me. Don't turn. It's a bully. It follows when you run. Don't run. He moved slowly and we matched him, stepping heel to toe, the fog pressed too close to our faces. The quiet had a shape now. I could feel where the lantern had gone down as if it were a space warm with attention. It didn't feel evil. It felt interested in a way that made my skin feel too small. We walked backward for what could have been 5 minutes or 30. That doesn't make sense, but time went wobbly in there. Twice I felt a gentle warmth lift behind my shoulder like someone cupping a palm just outside my coat. Twice I had to stop myself from turning to look. The man kept up a low line of ordinary talk that was almost funny. Where he grew up, the price of salt, the way fog settles heavier near water, a story about a black lab that learned to open the fridge. It was like he was reminding us how to be in a conversation that had nothing to do with the thing that watched us. The wall of white thinned. I could see the suggestion of the paved road, the stripe, the dark line of a hedge. Someone drove by slow, headlights smearing. The man nodded. "Good," he said, as if he'd been the one waiting for permission to stop. "Turn now, steady, don't give it the satisfaction of a run." We turned. My knees wanted to go. I kept them at a walk. When I glanced sideways, the man in the knit cap had already shouldered his bag. He tipped his head to us, a neighbor's nod. "Don't come back tonight," he said. "And don't bring it home by saying its name out loud. You can think it. Just don't say it. What is it?" Maya asked. Her voice was thin. He breathed in through his nose and looked toward the white again, as if there was something on the other side of it he respected and also hated. "A lantern," he said simply, and gave us that little nod again and was gone into the fog. We made it to the car. Ben put his wet, dirty foot on the floor mat, and we drove home with the heater blasting. No one talked until we were back in the house, and the den felt like a different planet. Maya sat on the floor and put her head in her hands. I found a towel for Ben and then a beer. He took 3 gulps like it was medicine. "Who was that guy?" he asked finally. "I don't know," I said. "Did it say your name?" Maya asked me without looking up. I didn't answer for a second, which was answer enough. That night, around 2, the house woke me up. I don't know how else to say it. The old wood popped and shifted the way it always does when the temperature drops, but I felt watched. The way you do at the DMV when you realize the person behind the counter has been waiting for you to notice your number being called. I went to the window and looked out at the quiet street. Fog lay on the lawns like someone had rolled cotton across them. The streetlights were islands. In the paired ovals of the neighbor's driveway, an orange shape moved like a slow swimmer. I told myself it was a reflection. A flare, anything else? The house smelled like kerosene. I didn't sleep again until 4. When I did, I dreamed I was 10, and Dad was sitting at the old kitchen table with the scanner on, the red LED numbers counting through channels. The room was yellow with lamplight. He was writing something on the back of an envelope. He didn't look up when I came in. "There's a light in there," he said. "Don't follow it." Then, without moving his mouth, the room said my nickname, and I woke with my hands clenched on the blanket like I'd been hanging off a ledge. In the morning, Ben found his missing shoe on the front stoop. It was wet and packed with dark soil like a potted plant waiting for something to grow. In the heel, pressed into the dirt, was a thin oval of brass, the kind you might see on an old key ring. It had a number stamped on it. I knew the number. It was the same 4 digits as the old extension Dad used to tell us to call if we were ever stuck at school without a ride. I called the city. I know how that sounds. It felt stupid and weird, but I called and asked if anyone knew a man working at Mount Hope. Older, gray beard, knit cap. I didn't give any details. I didn't know which details would sound like I needed a different kind of help. I got bounced twice and then ended up on the phone with a woman who handles volunteer groups for cleanups. She was kind. She said there had been a Dalrymple who did groundskeeping years back, but he'd had a stroke 5 or 6 winters ago and moved in with his daughter down near Belfast. He used to say he knew his way around that place in the dark, she said. He probably did. He started out as a teenager working summers and never learned how to retire. She laughed softly. He's opinionated about how people walk on the grass. I asked if he ever talked about a lantern. She paused. Honey, you're going to have to be more specific. We get a lot of stories. An old-timey light, I said. Shows up in fog. She was quiet again. I wouldn't follow any light you didn't bring yourself, she said finally. That's my official recommendation. There are a few more things. I'm putting them down because the pattern matters even if it doesn't make sense. A week later, Maya and I drove to the cemetery in the middle of the day with 2 coffees and a plan to stick to the road, like we were on a museum tour. It was bright, no fog. The place felt ordinary and kind. A volunteer group in neon vests was raking leaves into great orange tarps, and the sound of the rakes made the afternoon feel simple. We followed the loop and talked about Dad's old bowling team and which items in the house we were going to keep. I tried to retrace where we'd gone with the lantern. It was like trying to remember a route in a dream. We never found the unmarked stone. I know that sounds ridiculous because there are more than a few unmarked stones in there, but none of them were it. The air near the pond smelled like damp maples and ice. There was no kerosene. Ben texted that night from his apartment across town. He doesn't scare easy, but he asked if we could come over. When we got there, he pointed at the floor by the door and didn't talk for a minute. There were small dots on the wood, dark and round and unevenly spaced. If they'd been a little bigger, I would have called them candle drips. Kerosene doesn't bead like that. I know, but there they were. He said he'd mopped them up twice already. He said he hadn't brought any of Dad's stuff home. He made us tea and didn't drink his. 2 nights after that, the scanner in our den clicked on again. I wasn't touching it. Maya wasn't even in the house. She'd gone to stay with a friend because the quiet here had started to feel crowded. The red numbers lit. I could hear faint traffic on one channel. Then the hissing stepped and landed on a voice that was too thin to be a broadcast. It said very clearly 3 slow knocks. Not a word. Knocks. You know how a knock isn't a sound as much as it's a thing coming into your space? I heard that. Thump, thump, thump. The scanner clicked, the numbers rolled, and the box turned black again. I unplugged it and put it on the curb the next morning. I was halfway down the block when I realized I was carrying the brass tag from Ben's shoe in my coat pocket. I didn't remember putting it there. The number on it had warmed the metal where my fingers had been. Here's the last thing, and then I'll leave it. 2 days before we finished the house, a big fog came in early and didn't leave. I had a late run to the dump, and by the time I parked back at the house, the world was a hallway made of wet wool. I stood in the driveway and listened to how big the quiet was. Way out on the other side of the fog, a siren lifted and fell. Closer, someone's screen door creaked and clapped. Closer still, in the thin invisibility on the lawn, something bright and warm drifted like a thought. I didn't follow it. I don't want any hero points for that. I didn't follow it because my hands were full of a box of my dad's old spiral notebooks, and because my knees were tired, and because I had the taste of metal in my mouth, little and sharp like I'd bitten my lip. I went inside and closed the door and leaned against it like that would help. Maya moved back to Portland in November. Ben kept the brass tag on his dresser until it fell behind one day and he couldn't find it. He didn't look hard. I took the scanner to Goodwill and then turned around and took it, back from the donation line, because the kid working the counter was wearing the same brand of knit cap as the man in the fog, and I panicked at how small the world is. The scanner lives now in the trunk of my car, wrapped in a towel like a sleeping dog. Sometimes a smell follows me up the stairs. Sometimes I dream in orange. Sometimes I wake up and the darkness of the room isn't a blanket but a place. And on the far side of that place there's a bright thing waiting. The way a person waits at a door they know you'll open eventually if they're patient. If you go to Mount Hope in October and the fog is down, you might see it. You might hear the small sound of glass on a hook, patient and polite. If you're the kind of person who says hello to strangers, you'll want to say hello. If you're the kind who likes to help, you'll want to get closer in case someone needs you. I'm just asking, don't tell it your name. Don't let it behind you. And if it says your father's voice or your sister's or the one you called yourself when you were 5 and didn't know better yet, remember that interest isn't the same thing as kindness. Close the door. Go on with your night. Let the fog keep what the fog keeps. As I'm typing this, the house is quiet. The road is quiet. The scanner in the trunk of my car is turned off and has no batteries and lives under a spare tire. I'm not thinking about that. I'm not thinking about anything, really, except for how the den smells faintly of oil and damp wool even with the windows open, and how a minute ago I heard a small, careful clink out on the porch like glass under a gentle hand, and how if I hold very still, I can feel warmth gathering against the door from the outside, the shape of a light trying to make itself at home. I know how this sounds. Everyone in New Orleans has a ghost story, and if you work anywhere near the quarter, you end up telling them for tips whether you believe them or not. I didn't move here to chase the paranormal. I came after a breakup, took the first job I could find giving walking tours, history by day, haunts and horrors by night, and tried to keep my rent paid and my head down. This happened to me last fall, when the weather kept flipping between hot and sticky, and a sudden rain that felt like someone opened a faucet above the city. If you've ever been to St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, you know it's not really like a graveyard in the movies. It's tight. The tombs stand shoulder to shoulder like little houses, with narrow aisles that force strangers to brush past each other. They call these places cities of the dead, and that's exactly what it feels like. An old neighborhood where everyone's moved out except the walls. My boss, Connie, was the kind of person who could herd a bachelorette party through a thunderstorm and still make them tip. She gave me the day tours, which are supposed to be easier. You stick to facts, keep everyone from climbing tombs for selfies, point out the famous names. The cemetery has rules now. No solo wandering, no night access, and you go in with an approved guide. I learned the path the way bartenders learn orders. The gate on Basin Street, the caretaker's shed, the avenue with the whitewashed vaults, and the corner where the plaster on a low tomb was cracked like a smile that had been forced too long. They called that one the boys' seat. Tourists asked about it before they even crossed the threshold. Is this where people hear the crying? Someone would say, like they were ordering a cocktail. The legend is simple. Sometimes you hear a child weeping in the aisles, usually near that cracked tomb. Sometimes, if you're unlucky, you see him. A small boy in old-fashioned clothes, sitting and crying with his hands over his face. When you get close, he's gone. That's it, no curse. No backstory that ties it in a bow. New Orleans is full of stories that turn into tour patter. Yellow fever, famous queens, prison escapes. But the weeping child didn't come with a date or a name. Just the sound. I treated it like a script cue. If a group wanted spooky, I'd slow down as we approached that corner and say, "This is where guides report hearing a child crying. Even on days when there aren't any children here." If they wanted history, I'd talk about how families reuse vaults, how they once placed remains in canvas bags to make room, how heat in the tombs speeds everything up. Both versions kept people close and quiet. Either way, we got out on time. 3 main people matter in this story besides me. There's Connie, who ran the company. There's Marco, the other guide my age who worked the same shift and who didn't shut up about starting a podcast. And there's Mr. Landry, the cemetery caretaker, who carried a ring of keys that clanked like a warning, and who never needed to raise his voice to get people to listen. He lived in a small house not far from the gate and took his breaks sitting on a folding chair in the shade. His face was all lines, like the cemetery had been drawing maps on it for years. "Don't feed the story," he told me the first week after I pulled my group into a neat half circle and whispered about the crying. "Respect is what keeps this place quiet. Not fear, respect." "I'm just trying to keep the tourist from climbing the tombs," I said. He gave me a look that said he'd heard that before. "If you hear something you can't explain," he said, "you don't have to explain it to them." I started hearing it on my 4th week. Not the full sobbing, not at first. Just this watery hiccup of a noise that could have been a pigeon or a tea kettle or a kid, holding it together until he couldn't. It showed up in the same spot each time, one step past where the plaster had split on that low vault, and it made the hair under my hat prickle. I called it the faucet in my head. If I kept walking, it shut off. If I slowed down, it dripped. I didn't tell anyone because I knew the look I'd get back. A mix of, "That's great for tips," and "You've been in the sun too long." The thing about giving tours is you learn to listen only to what you can repeat into a microphone. Everything else you pocket. But it kept happening. I'd be mid-sentence. "The famous Voodoo Queen's tomb is over there. You can see the 3 X marks people leave even though they shouldn't." And I would hear it. A quick intake of breath. The wet catch of a cry swallowed too fast. I'd glance to where it should be, and there would be nothing but the hairline fracture in the plaster and the little offerings people leave. Coins. A plastic car, a marble, a paper crane that was slowly sagging in the humidity. That car is important too. A blue toy sedan that first showed up on a Thursday. Every day after, it would be somewhere slightly different. On top of the vault, on the ground beside it, facing the aisle as if about to pull out. I assumed some tourist was moving it around for a joke, or the wind was nudging it off the edge. Still, I started gently putting it back to the same spot whenever I passed. It made me feel like I was doing my part in a game I didn't understand. On a Saturday, I told Marco, we were in the shade by the caretaker's shed, drinking water and sharing a pack of peanut butter crackers. You'll get used to it, he said. I've got a recorder app on my phone. I pick up voices all the time. Sometimes they say my name. Do you tell people that? He smiled like I'd asked whether he breathes. What else am I going to tell them? Facts? Connie walked up then and Marco changed the subject, but later he airdropped me a file. From last week, he said, if you want to hear it. I didn't play it until that night in my apartment above a bar on Rampart. It's a narrow place with steep stairs and windows that don't quite seal. So the music downstairs feels like it sleeps in the walls. I turned on the fan, put the phone on my pillow and hit play. There was Marco's voice doing his pitch, 100 times smoother than mine. Then wind. Then the shuffle of shoes on gravel. Then a sound like a tiny choke, the softest sob. I stopped the file before it finished and stared at the ceiling. I wanted to believe someone in his tour group had just been upset, or a car horn had warped through the tombs and turned into something else. The brain is good at making sense of echoes. The brain is less good at what happened Monday. Connie called in sick, so I combined 2 afternoon groups, an older couple from Wisconsin, a pair of college girls in matching bucket hats, a man with expensive sunglasses and a quiet girlfriend, and a family from Lakeview who knew more about New Orleans history than I did. The day was shiny and hot and windy, the kind of wind that swirls dust in the alleys and makes you wish for rain. Mr. Landry unlocked the gate and said, "Close on time," and I said, "Yes, sir," because when he said something you wanted to answer right. The first half went smooth. I hit the spots, answered questions, stopped a guy from leaning on a vault for a photo. When we reached the cracked tomb, I slowed down and watched the crowd the way you watch a dog in a room full of wine glasses. I heard nothing. Not a drip. Is this the crying place? One of the college girls asked, like she was ordering dessert. That's what people say, I said. Sometimes guides and visitors report hearing a child, usually when it's quiet. The older couple leaned forward. Polite, that's when the Lakeview dad's little boy, 7, maybe 8, tugged his sleeve and pointed down. My car, he said. The blue one. The father looked confused. Buddy, you left your toy at the hotel. No, the boy said, too sure for a kid that age. That's mine. He stepped out of the aisle and picked up the small blue car I'd been moving for days. He held it like a bird. Let's leave it where it is, the dad said gently. But it's mine, the boy insisted. He put it in his pocket. The aisle went tight and quiet in a way I didn't like. Let's keep together, I called louder than necessary, and we moved on. I told them about the architecture and the inscriptions and the way the ground here is more water than dirt. I pretended I didn't feel like someone had picked up the thinnest string in the place and wound it around my chest. We were supposed to be out by 3:30. At 3:20, I realized my key wasn't in my pocket. Guides wear a lanyard with a single brass key. Mr. Landry issues it every morning and takes it every afternoon, and I had been patting it without thinking for weeks. Now I put my hand there and felt air. Everybody stay here, I said, and tried not to let it show on my face how bad I felt. I retraced the last path through the rows, eyes on the ground, rehearsing the conversation I'd have with Mr. Landry. I passed the cracked tomb. I saw the empty spot where the blue car had been. I didn't hear anything. I didn't find the key. I checked the caretaker's shed. I checked my bag. I checked every pocket twice. When I came back to the group, the expensive sunglasses guy was crouched on the ground near the cracked tomb, searching the gravel. My girlfriend lost her ring, he said without looking up. His voice was flat, like he knew exactly how well that would go over. The girlfriend's hand was bare and pale. She looked sick. I gave them that tight, polite smile guides learn, the one that says, I'm going to do everything I can, and you have made my day harder, at the same time. I told everyone to stand in the shade and drink water. Then I knelt and began sifting gravel with my hands. The wind had dropped and the heat moved in. The aisle went quiet except for the rasp of our fingers in the dust. Sifting for something small humbles you. It convinces you that your eyes are not as good as you thought. I found a dime, a tab from a can, a dull white pebble, and then I heard it. So light and sure it might have been right against my ear. A child, trying not to cry. Hiccup, breath, swallow. A wet whisper. Buddy? I said without thinking, and felt stupid as soon as the word left my mouth. Hello? Do not talk to it, said a voice behind me, and I nearly dropped the handful of gravel I'd been holding. Mr. Landry was standing in the aisle as if he'd been there the whole time, arms crossed over his chest. I had never heard him speak that way, soft but urgent, like a warning before a horn. "I lost my key," I said, because I needed him to know I had a reason to feel weird. "We'll find it," he said, not looking at me. He was looking over my shoulder beyond the cracked vault, toward the narrow cross aisle where sunlight washed and backed away. "Get your people by the gate, now." "The ring." "Gate," he said again. When adults use that tone in a place like that, people listen. I stood, I waved. The older couple straightened like kids in church. The Lakeview family gathered their bag. The college girls tugged their hats down and followed. Sunglasses guy hovered, staring at the ground, and his girlfriend held her empty hand like she could still feel the ring there. 2 minutes, he said. "Gate," Mr. Landry said. Not to him, to me, and I moved. I walked the group to the front like I had a rope in my hand, and they were tied to it, turned them around to face the street, told them a little useless history I didn't remember later, and then said, "I'll be right back," and told the family to keep everyone there. The dad nodded. The little boy looked past me down the aisle toward the cracked vault with the same stubborn certainty he'd had earlier. I went back. The aisle seemed longer. The heat had that dead aquarium feel it gets right before rain. Mr. Landry was still there, a few steps from the cracked tomb, hands at his sides. "I heard it," I said, because now it felt worse not to say it out loud. He nodded once. Sometimes it calls when you ignore it. Sometimes when you feed it. He looked at the top of the vault where the blue toy had always been. "Don't give children here what you can't take back." I didn't. I started and then stopped. I thought of the way I'd set that car back in place, like pressing a button in a game. A few inches this way, a few inches that way. I thought of the little boy claiming it. I felt stupid again for reasons I couldn't fully line up. "Where did you hear it?" Mr. Landry asked. "Here," I said, and put my hand out like I was feeling rain. "Right here." "Good," he said, and stepped forward between me and the vault. He looked at the crack like a doctor looks into a small wound, calm, precise, a little tired. He raised his hand and, very gently, like asking permission, touched the plaster with 2 fingers. It was cool. I could tell even from where I stood. The air had gone heavy and the heat pressed in on my back, but the stone held a coolness like shadow water. "People leave things," he said. "Coins, toys, notes they're ashamed to write in daylight. They make promises in a place where they think no one can hear them. This is not that kind of church." He took his hand back, and when he did, water traced a thin print down the plaster, like the stone had started sweating. The sound came again, not loud. Glass bell small, right at the pitch that gets into your head because it's a sound you're wired to know. Not a trick of wind, not a phone, not anything but a child who is too tired and too alone to make it dramatic. "Hey," I said, and then I realized the sunglasses guy had walked up behind us and was staring at the crack too. "My ring," he said softly. It rolled. He crouched and stuck his fingers into the narrow gap just where the plaster had peeled like a hangnail. "I think don't," Mr. Landry said, and the guy froze. "Don't put your hand in there." "It's gold," the guy said, like that was an argument that solved everything. He reached in deeper. "Hey," I said, because I could see the way his hand was disappearing into a space I couldn't see. "We can get someone." "We can?" "I've got it," he said through his teeth. Then the crying changed. It went from hiccups to a longer sound, not louder but deeper, the way a hallway makes a voice sound farther and bigger at the same time. It came from behind us, then from ahead, then from both, like 3 kids crying in 3 directions. The sunglasses guy yanked his hand back with a curse. He'd scraped his knuckles raw. Not bleeding much, just those shallow lines you get from old concrete. He looked at his hand like it had betrayed him. "It's in there," he said. "I saw it." "Gate," Mr. Landry said again to me. "Now, what is it?" I asked, "What is it actually?" "I don't know," he said. "And I've been here longer than you've been alive." We walked. The weeping followed like water in a pipe. It wasn't behind us anymore. It was with us. I could feel it in the temperature of the air, in the way the wind had started up without moving anything. We turned onto the main aisle, and I saw my group under the arch by the gate, the little boy on his toes looking back, the college girls holding hands without turning it into a joke. I didn't run, but my legs argued with me about it. At the gate, Mr. Landry reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. "Here," he said to me, holding it up. It wasn't my key. It was his, bigger, older, the kind of thing you imagine locks on castles look like. He slid it into the padlock and turned, and the chain slacked in a way that felt like someone finally exhaled. "Thank you," the older woman said, close to tears herself. The sunglasses guy was still staring at his scraped hand like it might form a message. "We're closed," Mr. Landry said, and it was both an announcement and a prayer. He ushered them out, all of us, and when the gate swung shut behind us, the crying stopped so completely it made my ears buzz. The Lakeview boy tugged his dad's sleeve. "Can I keep my car?" he asked, looking up at me like I would be the one to say yes. "Leave it," Mr. Landry said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The boy took the toy from his pocket and put it down on the base of the gate, like a dog laying a leash at a door. He looked like he might cry, too. Then he squared his little shoulders and took his dad's hand. I turned to Mr. Landry with 100 questions. He held up his hand. "End of day," he said. "Bring me your lanyard tomorrow. I'll find your key. I'm sorry," I said, and meant it in a lot of directions. He nodded and walked away toward the caretaker's house, the keys at his hip clicking like a small machine. I walked home by a route that avoided mirrors. I didn't want to see my face and try to read it. I wanted to put the day in a box and not open it until morning. My apartment was 2 rooms, one of which never cooled. I took a shower, stood under lukewarm water until my skin didn't feel like it held heat anymore, and then I made pasta. It tasted like paste. I put on a TV show I'd already seen twice because I didn't want the responsibility of a new plot. I told myself that if I heard anything at night, it would be the bar downstairs, and I'd have an answer ready. I was fine until I noticed the water lines on my backpack. You know the pattern drips make when they dry on canvas? The faint rings like tide marks? They were there, near the zipper. I hadn't been in rain. I hadn't set the bag down in anything wet. I opened it and took everything out. Wallet, tour pamphlets, bottle of sunscreen, spare batteries, granola bar, notebook. At the very bottom, something rattled. It was the blue car. For a second, I thought I'd laugh. I thought I'd text Marco a picture with a caption like, "You got me," but my hands didn't get the memo from my brain. They were careful, like picking up glass. I put the car on my kitchen table. It looked smaller inside than it had on the stone. I stared at it until the TV stopped mattering. I turned the TV off. The apartment got very, very quiet, the way it does late when the bar downstairs switches from music to mopping. I picked up my phone and wrote a text to Connie, then deleted it. I typed one to Mr. Landry, deleted that too. What was I going to say? "You know that thing we don't talk about because you said not to feed it? It's on my table." At 2 a.m., someone in the bar dragged a metal chair across the floor and my chest popped like someone shortened a string inside it. That's how wired I was. At 2:15, something else happened. The sound came again, not through the wall. Not from my phone. From the room with me, as if the air had learned it. A child trying not to cry. I stood so fast my chair tipped. "Hey," I said to the empty room, ridiculous and dead serious. I have this habit when I'm scared of talking out loud to make myself feel like I'm part of the world that includes other people. "I hear you. I can't help if I don't know what you want." The sound hiccuped once and stopped. I waited, counting seconds the way you count when you're a kid holding your breath in a pool. 10, 20, 30. The fan clicked in the ceiling. The city moved on the other side of the window, neon and wet and late. Nothing. I sat down again. I put my palms on the table. The blue car was pointed at me now. I know that sounds like a punchline, like the kind of detail you put in a story to make comments call you a liar, but I'm telling you exactly what I remember. The front of the car, those tiny silver dots for headlights, was facing me when it had been facing the wall a moment before. The car didn't move while I watched it. There was no dramatic scrape. It was just not pointing the same way it had been. "Okay," I said, because the alternative was screaming. "Okay?" I slid my hands under the car and picked it up. I didn't know if I was about to insult the dead or save my sanity. I took it to the sink, turned the cold water on, and held the car under the stream like I was washing something alive. I felt stupid and desperate and suddenly certain, like the moment when you realize the only way out is through the wrong door. "I'll bring it back," I said. "I'll bring it back first thing." There was a knock at my door. It wasn't loud. 3 compact taps, knuckles on wood. I stood there with water running and a toy car in my hand and the feeling that the world had decided to get very small. "Yeah," I said through the door. Because that's how you live long enough to pay next month's rent. It's Landry, said Mr. Landry's voice, and something in me fell into a chair it had been keeping warm. I opened the door. He stood in the hall wearing a clean shirt, no keys on him, like a ghost of himself. For a second, I had the impossible thought that he had never owned keys at all. He looked past me at the table in the car and the way I was holding it like a wet animal. "You took it," he said, not accusing. "Fact. It was in my bag," I said. "I didn't." "I know," he said. "You didn't. How did you?" He stepped inside without asking and closed the door softly, the way you close a door when there's something sleeping in the next room. He put a paper bag on my table that I hadn't seen him carrying, and from it he took out a towel, an old cotton dishcloth that had seen better days, and held it out. I put the car in the towel and he folded it like you fold a blessing. "Why does it cry?" I asked, because my voice had to do something. "Because it can," he said, and the way he said it I believed that answers can be small like that and still be true. He tucked the towel and the car back into the paper bag. Sometimes places keep sounds the way trees keep coins melted into them. Sometimes they keep more. "Is it a kid?" I asked. Did someone?" "I don't know," he said, and I believe that too. "Do you know every name on every street you've lived on?" "No." "Then don't ask this place to give you names like receipts." He lifted the bag. "You'll bring it tomorrow. You'll put it where you found it. And then you'll leave it alone." "What about the ring?" I asked, my brain grabbing for the practical thing because it could hold it without shaking. "It rolled into that crack. She lost it." He looked at me in this very quiet way that said he'd heard every version of, "But what about my stuff?" and had a place in his head for each one. "In the morning," he said, "we'll ask the stone what it can give back." He opened the door to the hall. The air felt different beyond it. Cooler. Like something had decided it didn't need to be near me anymore. "Get some sleep," he said, and walked away, soft steps on old wood, like he kept the weight of his job off his feet even at night. I slept badly. Every dream had wet edges. When I woke, the paper bag sat on my table like a promise I had to keep. I carried it to work at 9 a.m., like I was bringing birthday cake to a party for someone I didn't know. Mr. Landry was already at the gate. He nodded at the bag and led me in without talking. The cemetery felt like it does at that hour, white and quiet and a little embarrassed about the day ahead. We walked to the cracked tomb and I took the car out and set it on top, the spot I'd been aiming for all along. It looked right. It looked like something found its way back. "Your key is in the shed," he said. "Check the hook." It was there, hanging where it always hung. I didn't ask how. I clipped it to my lanyard and tried not to pat it like a pet. "What about the ring?" I asked when I came back out because the practical thing still needed its answer. He led me to the cracked vault. He didn't touch the plaster this time. He crouched and stared into the narrow gap, and I did the same. For a second, all I saw was shadow. Then a small circle winked in the dark, catching sun from a slant I couldn't see. He reached in, careful, and pulled out a gold band. It was dusty and harmless and deeply something I wanted to hand to anyone but myself. "Bring her by," he said, brushing dirt from the ring with his thumb. "We don't want to keep what isn't ours." I didn't have a tour that morning. I texted Connie that I had an errand at the cemetery, and she sent 5 thumbs-up emojis and a reminder to be charming. I walked to the hotel where the couple had said they were staying and left a message at the desk. An hour later, the girlfriend came to the gate with sunglasses guy behind her like a shadow, and she cried when I put the ring in her hand, not sobbing, not weeping, just a small human relief that made the air around us feel sensible again. "How did you?" she started and then decided not to ask. "Thank you, they left." The day moved on. The tours came and went. People asked about famous names and I told them what I'd been told. I didn't slow down at the cracked tomb. I didn't repeat the legend. I talked about family plots and the way the heat turns time into something with different rules here, and I kept moving. That night, my apartment felt like a normal place where a person eats alone and watches other people's lives on a screen. I didn't hear anything that wasn't explainable by a bar and a street and a fan that needs oil. I didn't wake to knocks or sobs. I slept hard. In the morning, I found the towel from the paper bag folded on my kitchen table. I hadn't put it there. I don't own a towel like that. Thin cotton, old bleach stains, a frayed edge that looks almost like writing if you tilt your head. I didn't throw it away. I didn't wash it. I folded it again and put it in a drawer. I still guide sometimes. If you come to my tour, I won't take you to that cracked tomb on purpose. If you ask, I'll nod and we'll pass by, and I'll talk about anything else I can talk about that is true. If you ask whether the crying is real, I'll say, people hear things. If you ask whether I heard it, I'll say, I don't have to explain what I can't explain. Sometimes, if I'm the last one out and it's late afternoon and the wind flips directions and the light hits the plaster just so, I'll see a damp trace on the stone, the shape of 2 fingers laid there gently and taken away. Sometimes the blue car is there. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes a marble appears, or a note tucked under the edge of the vault that makes my chest hurt even before I read it. Messages like, I'm sorry and please and I'll be better, and sometimes I'll hear it. Not every time. Not even most. Just enough to know the story isn't something I put there by talking. Here's the last thing, and I know this will sound like I'm trying too hard to be spooky, but I promise I'm not. A few weeks ago, I was walking down the aisle near the cracked tomb, not thinking about anything except the heat, when I heard a small sound behind me, like a hiccup swallowed by someone who's had a lot of practice. I kept walking. I didn't feed it. Respect, not fear. At the end of the row, something small zipped across the ground at my feet and stopped against my shoe. It was a bottle cap, scuffed and ordinary. I picked it up without thinking and started to toss it in my bag, and then I felt it. Cool, like it had just come out of a fridge, even though it had been sitting in sunlit dust. I put it back down where it had stopped and kept moving. The sound didn't follow. The gate closed the way it always does, the chain settling like a line being drawn in pencil. I learned this much. The story is not a show put on for us. It's not a favor. It doesn't end when the gate shuts. It does what it does whether I explain it or not. And if you get a piece of it in your hand, something small, not precious until it is, you bring it back. You put it where it wants to be. You don't keep what isn't yours. When people ask me now what the scariest thing I've seen on my tours is, I should say the time a drunk guy almost fell off a tomb. I should say the rat that ran across the aisle and made a whole group scream. But what I say is this. The scariest thing is how ordinary it sounds. Just a kid trying not to cry. Then I move us along, and we step into a narrow shade that feels like a hallway with no doors. And for a second, whether they believe in any of this or not, everyone gets quiet the way people get quiet when someone else in the room is trying very hard not to be heard. And we keep walking because that's the only thing that seems to help. I'm not posting this because I want attention. I'm posting this because I can't sleep, and every time I close my eyes I hear the sound of metal taps clicking in wet grass. 2 summers ago, I took a night security job at Arlington National Cemetery. It was supposed to pay off a chunk of debt and keep me from going nuts sitting in my apartment after a breakup. I'm not military. My dad did 4 years in the Army in the 90s, and he raised us to be respectful. Don't cut through headstones. Don't touch the coins. You stand still when you hear taps, that kind of thing. I thought that would be enough. Keep the quiet, call park police if someone hops a fence, make sure the gates lock. Easy. The first night, the supervisor, a former MP named Serrano, gave me the speech. Respect the place, leave the historians and volunteers alone. Don't argue with the old guard, 3rd Infantry, if they ask you to stay out of their way near the tomb. We did orientation in a fluorescent lit room that smelled like coffee that had died twice. There were 4 of us on nights that summer. Me, a guy my age named Nate who talked nonstop about podcasts, an older guard named Kelly, who had the permanent squint of someone who wore sunglasses for 20 years, and a part-timer named D, a nursing student who took 2 nights a week. 2 radios, Serrano said, slapping them on the table. 1 for us, 1 for USPP. Don't call USPP unless you have to. Eyes are on the tomb at all times after midnight. Don't go there unless they call you. Otherwise you do your rounds and you don't get cute. What's getting cute? I asked. Chasing ghosts, he said, deadpan, then let me stand there for 3 seconds thinking he was serious before he cracked a smile. There's a lot of stories. Don't make them your problem, I laughed and said, okay, and then I did the stupid thing. I asked, like what kind of stories? Kelly leaned in his chair until it popped. There's a soldier who walks, he said. Full uniform, old hem style, real square shoulders. Marches between the rows. If you follow him, he sinks into the ground at an unknown's grave. People say he's been counted in every decade back to the 60s. Serrano shot him a look. Don't start. I'm just telling him what people say, Kelly shrugged. We don't chase him. We all laughed again. I tucked that away with other folklore that comes with any night shift. The theater downtown has a woman in white who messes with the lights. The hospital has a crying kid in pediatrics after visiting hours. I used to think these stories keep you from thinking about the real stuff. Drunks, break-ins, the boredom. The cemetery after midnight doesn't feel like any other place I've been. In the daytime, the white headstones fold into neat lines and the tourists are quiet, and the sun makes everything sharp. At night, the lines get less perfect. The moon creates its own rows and the sky is never completely black because DC glows. The air smells like old rain and cut grass even when it hasn't rained in days. There's a low hum from the parkway and the river, and underneath it is the kind of silence that presses on your ears. We rotated sections for patrol, so no one got the same path 2 nights in a row. The rounds are slow on purpose. You move with your flashlight down, not swinging it like a sword, just keeping it ready. You learn to identify shapes in your peripheral, deer moving like shadows, foxes that look bold until you clap. You also learn you don't need the light as much as you think. The white marble and limestone catch any glow available. The first strange thing I noticed wasn't visual. It was coins. If you've never been, people leave coins on headstones. There's a whole tradition to it. Pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, each supposedly meaning something about the relationship. Pennies just that you visited. Quarters that you were present when they fell. Whether or not the meanings are true, the practice is. You're not supposed to touch the coins. Grounds crews collect them for maintenance funds sometimes, or the families do. But the first week during my 0200 sweep, I kept hearing the faintest clink like someone tapping change against stone. I kept turning, beam up, nothing there, clink, clink, not constant. Not in a pattern, just like someone absently playing with something metallic in their pocket. That same night in Section 35, my radio clicked with static and I heard a voice under it. Not a word I could pick out. I stopped walking and turned my head like that would help, which it never does with a radio. Then it cleared and I heard Nate. You copy? I'm near the amphitheater. Got a fox trying to look me in the eyes. Copy, I said. My voice sounded normal. Inside, I felt something tighten. I didn't tell him about the static and I didn't tell myself that I'd heard a cadence under it. Not a word. A rhythm, step, 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 halt. The next night, I learned what click on grass sounds like. I didn't know heel taps were still a thing outside of drill. It had rained earlier. Light summer stuff that made the surface of everything damp, and as I came around a curve, I heard it. Click, click. Not like a rock. Not like a branch snapping. More deliberate. You know how a solid pair of shoes sounds when someone who cares about precision wears them? I froze. My brain did something stupid and fed me, "You're on a gravel path." And I had to physically look down to remind myself I wasn't. The click passed to my right, just beyond the beam. I brought the flashlight up slowly. Don't do it dramatic. You want to see whatever's there as if it's boring. People decide how to act based on what you show them. I learned that bouncing at bars through college. There was no one. Ahead of me, the grass made a faint, darker swath between 2 rows of stone. Visitors make those between popular graves, shortcuts. This one felt straighter. I walked to it and crouched. The dampness made a thin sheen on each blade. There were disturbances like little commas where damp had been pressed out of the edges by something narrow, repeated, regular. Boat hill, boat two. A line of them side by side. If I'd placed a ruler down, it would have matched one edge. They weren't fresh like puddles. More like someone had walked it 15 minutes before. I stood still for a minute too long, then forced myself to complete my sweep. I didn't tell anyone. It sounded dumb and I didn't want a nickname. On my 7th night, the 4 of us did coffee at 1 in the morning. The cemetery is a lot of things, but it's not heartless. There's a small break room near administration where you can sit. We kept voices low even in there. Dee had an exam the next morning and was visiting the espresso machine like it could give her a diploma. "Hey, you hear that story about the guy who walks?" Nate asked, mouthful of Pop-Tart. Serrano sighed. "Please, God. I heard something last night," Nate said. Not joking. He had that slightly higher, brittle tone people get when they aren't sure if the thing is embarrassing or serious. Footsteps. I thought a person cut through, but it was like drill. Click, click. Not running. I didn't see anything. Serrano stirred powdered creamer. "You'll hear stuff. Sound carries weird here." Wind through flagpoles, deer nosing the little stones people leave. Don't get creative. If you think you see someone, you call it in. You don't walk right up. What happens if you follow? Dee asked, no particular tone, eyes on her phone. You get yelled at for leaving your post, Serrano said. Then he looked at me like he'd learned to read my face in 7 days. And no, there's not a rule about that. It's a courtesy to yourself. If you chase one odd thing, you'll see 50. We all nodded. We went back out. 3 o'clock is the deadest part of the night. Even the animals settle. Even the river sounds farther away. You can feel your heartbeat in your gums. I was on the west side, older stones not too far from a section where headstones just say unknown. The letters on some are so shallow with age they look embossed instead of carved. It's the part of the cemetery where your brain keeps trying to multiply. How many bodies, how many nameplates, how many names never said out loud anymore. It's like standing inside a choir that isn't singing. I heard the click to my left. Click. Click. I didn't turn my light. I kept it pointed at the ground and angled, the beam just enough to catch movement if it crossed the path ahead of me. Click. Breath. Click. Line of white markers to my left made a lane that ran, between them like a rifle barrel. I saw God, this sounds contradictory. I saw the absence of dark, like a shape that blocked the moonlight. Not violently, just a slightly crisp edge where there should have been a softer edge. It moved and the clicks matched it. My mouth went dry. Post in orders? A voice said from somewhere behind me. I jerked so hard my neck cracked. The old guard has their own language and rituals around the tomb. Everyone who works nights learns enough to respect the boundary. You do not mess with those soldiers. I turned to see a young guy in dress uniform, except he wasn't in full dress. He was in the middle uniform they wear when they're between the black overcoat and shirt sleeves, the one that still looks nicer than anything I own. He had a jaw you could shave ice with and a stare that could cut paper. He wasn't one of the ones I usually saw, but they rotate. Just me, I said, fighting the urge to apologize for breathing. Section sweep, he tilted his head. You hear something? I hesitated. Footsteps. He looked past me at the headstones like he was scanning a sea. You don't chase, he said in a not unfriendly way, like he was saying, don't try the chili dogs. Then, how many steps between turns? I stared. He made it easier. When you heard it? How many steps? I wasn't counting. He nodded and started walking back the way he'd come. If you count, it's always 21, he said over his shoulder, more to the night than to me. I stood there like an idiot with my heartbeat in my throat and thought about the number until it pulled at me. The guard at the tomb walks 21 steps. He stands for 21 seconds. He turns. It's a number that means highest tribute if you read the brochures. I raised my light and counted the faint disturbances in the damp. I ran my finger above the grass, not touching. 1, 2, 3, 21, a turn, 21 back. I wasn't brave. I tried to be boring. I did not try to get a look at his face. The thing about a story is once it has your attention, it knows. The small things started to cluster. In a camera aimed at a gate, there was a skip at 03 and 07 every night, a hiccup of static that wasn't on any other feed. The park police officer who came by on Thursdays stopped in the gatehouse to top off his coffee and asked casually, You see the guy who got lost? We said, What guy? And he said, In the old blue. People report him sometimes. Think he's reenactor or something. He said it like he didn't really want to be having this conversation. Old blue? Dee asked. Like, Civil War, the officer said. He sounded like a person who had been corrected before and wasn't going to open himself up to it again. I'm not saying I believe it. I'm saying I've been called for a disturbance and had a family describe him in the same words 3 years apart. Grounds crews started leaving a little flag on a particular corner of a section near us. Not like the big holiday flags, just a survey flag, because a strip of grass along the edge of a row wasn't growing back right. The maintenance guy, Mr. Gibbons, said he'd replaced the sod there twice and it kept flattening like someone who knew exactly where to step was stepping on it every night. I started counting steps in other parts of my life. To the bathroom, to my car. 21 felt like a magic trick my brain wanted to solve. 2 weeks in, a storm hit right after midnight. Not a hurricane, just the kind of fast, hard summer thunder that makes everything feel 3 feet closer. The sound, the air, the electricity. We lost power for maybe 3 seconds and the generators kicked. The lights along the main road popped and stayed steady, but the smaller path lights took a minute. Serrano called all units to check in and told us to do extra passes along a few external fence lines. People like to hop in storms thinking it covers their noise. It never really does. I was in the section with the shallow-lettered unknown stones when the radio hissed in my ear and I heard very clearly a voice I could have recorded and played for you if I hadn't been so busy stalling out. Post and orders remain as directed. It wasn't the radio. It wasn't Nate. It was 6 inches away from my right ear. I turned every direction too fast to see in anyone. The rain made everything look like it was veiled in plastic. Lightning made the headstones flash brighter than the sky for a split hum, and then the after image stayed when I blinked. Thunder rolled the way thunder rolls in places with big open spaces and stone, down and then back up from the ground. My shoes were soaked. My breath wrapped my face. Ahead of me, the not dark moved across the gap an inch to the left like it had adjusted to attention. The click started again. I was counting before I was aware of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. Not for a breath. For a count I could feel without counting. It resumed. It headed toward a rise and then a slight dip and then a line of 3 markers that were older than the rest. Text harder to make out. Lightning again, 1, 2, thunder. Nate came up on my left, his light too bright and jittering. "You hear that?" He whispered like we weren't already both soaked and loud. "Yeah," I said. My voice so soft I wasn't sure it made it to the air. We followed at an angle, not crossing anything we shouldn't, not getting in any line that would mean stepping over a grave. Respect is muscle memory out there. The shape ahead of us didn't get clearer. It never snapped into a man-shaped man. It stayed just barely wrong. Serrano's voice on the radio. "Leave it." I don't know if he was talking to us specifically or to the whole world. Nate lowered his light a hair. We kept walking slower like we had agreed on it. The clicks stopped. The shape. If I call it a shape, it makes it sound like the kind of story where you see the face and that's the picture on the book cover. I never saw a face. I saw the impression of weight, of someone who believed he had weight standing in the row. He turned or the edges got different and he faced one of the stones that says only unknown. U.S. soldier. I could read that because lightning timed itself, so that the letters went bright and then black, behind my eyelids. He lifted his arm, a salute. I swear to you I have never wanted to say I was wrong more in my life. I wanted to tell you I misread a deer flicking water off its ears, or a flag rope knocking, or a person with a rain poncho flapping. It wasn't, it was a salute and it was as sharp as anything all night. The ground at the base of the stone. It didn't open. This is where you expect me to say it opened. It did something I still can't describe without sounding like I never passed high school physics. It lost its sharpness. The edge where grass met soil met stone just softened, like someone had drawn their thumb over a charcoal line. The darker turned a slightly different darker. The post of the stone stayed absolutely where it was, and the figure sank the way weight sinks into a mattress. No ripple exactly, more a settling. It sank to the knees, then the hips. There was a thickness to the air like you get when you're underwater a foot, and you can feel the whole river above you. Then gone, no splash. The rain continued on the stone. Nate made a sound that was not a word. He stepped forward like he was going to lunge, and I grabbed his elbow and squeezed. If he had gone any closer, I think something in his head would have broken. Serrano reached us a breath later and put a hand on both our shoulders, not rough. We stood there like idiots in the rain, facing a stone that said nothing more than it had said 10 minutes before we stopped to watch a person not there do something impossible. We didn't talk about it in the break room. We didn't talk about it the next day. We were men who didn't gossip suddenly. I went home at 8 in the morning like I always did. I showered and sleep refused to be where I left it. I got coffee and watched the ceiling and thought about the way the edge of the ground softened. If you've ever overexposed a photo so the whites bleed, imagine that in reverse dimming. Something else started after that night. I guess you call it aftershocks. We'd find damp boot prints on dry nights. Not muddy tread, not something you could match to a specific sole. Just darker ovals almost dried by the time you saw them, always in groups of 21. Coins would be stacked on certain stones in little exact towers that were a hair crooked, like someone was doing it fast and still making it count. One morning, the video feed for the gate that always glitched showed a reflection from an angle it wasn't pointed at. A row of headstones with a shadow cast that didn't match the light as recorded on the weather that night. I took a still. I deleted it an hour later because keeping it felt like inviting something to live on my phone. A week later, on a clear night, The old guard guy I'd seen, the one who asked about steps, stopped me again near the tomb boundary. I wasn't close, just close enough that he didn't have to raise his voice to speak to me. He didn't have to speak to me at all. If you're not a tourist, you give them space. He glanced once to see if anyone else was around, and then he said, "You don't chase, right?" "I don't chase," I said. "He ever talked to you?" He asked. It wasn't a trap. More like checking my temperature. "No." "He talked to someone I know," he said. He thought it was one of us. Asked for the watch relief. My buddy told him he was out of uniform. He almost smiled. That was the wrong answer. He didn't show for a while after that. "Do you know where he goes?" I asked, surprising both of us by speaking. The soldier looked past me again, not at anything. "It's not one of ours," he said carefully, like he was trying not to break something with the wrong words. "But it's a post. It's always a post." That night at home, I dreamed I stood on the cemetery's grass in bare feet and felt the click of a heel through the ground, as if someone was walking just below the surface. When I woke up, the sound was still there. A harmless rhythm in my air conditioner that I would have sworn wasn't there before. It went away when the unit kicked off. It came back when it started again. I turned it off and sat sweating and listening to the traffic on the parkway that wasn't anywhere near me. I told my dad. He listened without laughing, his hands tense around his coffee mug. He stared at the middle distance and said, "Men do what they're told to do for so long it becomes bigger than telling." Then he added very softly, "You don't argue with what someone thinks is duty." You might think the climax of this was the rain night. Maybe it was. But there was one more thing. It happened on a Tuesday 3, maybe 4 weeks into the job, around 4 in the morning when even the river sounds like it's asleep. I had section 60. If you don't know what that means, leave it at that. It's newer. It's heavy in a way different from the older parts. The stones have names on them that you've seen in the news if you paid attention to anything since you were 10. The path lights hummed. The air felt like it had been washed and then hung. I had developed a small habit of carrying a quarter in my pocket on night rounds. Not to leave it, just to weight my fingers. I'd flick it, flip it, feel the grooves. I told myself it was to keep my hands busy. Truth, it was so I'd know if I was the one making the coin sounds. I turned a corner and he was there. In the only sense he ever was there. Not a man-shaped hole, but an attention that made the hair under my hat lift. He was in the middle of a row, not walking, facing a stone. I didn't count the steps to get to him. I didn't raise my light. I stood just behind a line even my instincts didn't want me to step over, and I said, because I'm an idiot, "Hey." He didn't turn. Of course he didn't turn. Wind can't turn, and he was like wind that decided to be a man. I said, "If you're looking for your post, I think you found it." That sounds stupider typed out than it did in the moment. I don't know why I said it. Maybe because the old guard guy said it was always a post. The air around me got colder 2 degrees, like stepping into shade. I had the sudden animal urge to put my hand on the top of the nearest headstone and swear that I meant no harm to anyone ever. Instead, I reached into my pocket and took out the quarter. I held it in my palm. "I'm not going to leave this on anyone," I said. I want to know if you're listening." The coin lifted, not like a magic trick where it floats in a straight line, more like the air under it decided to weigh less. It rose an inch, and then it tilted 90 degrees and clicked against my palm like a salute in miniature. Then it dropped back, the precise weight of normal. The click I had been hearing for weeks happened a half-inch from my skin. It was metal on something very old, and the bottom of my stomach fell out like I'd tipped over. "Okay," I said, "because what else do you say when your quarter salutes you?" "Okay." He didn't walk away. The air didn't blur. Nothing dramatic. But a breeze moved near my ear, and I heard words that were so formal they didn't fit in a parking lot, let alone at 4 in the morning with no one around to hear them. "Relieving you." I don't know if he meant me. I don't know if he meant someone else who had been waiting longer than I've been alive. I only know that when I did the rest of my sweep, I moved quietly and I did not step over the patch of ground he liked. I counted without looking at my watch. 21 to the corner. 21 back, 21, 21. Around 5, when the sky started getting that thin early light that makes the stones look almost transparent, I passed a set of unknown markers and paused to catch my breath. There was a coin on one of them, a quarter. It had been standing on its edge. I swear it stood between one step and the next. If you ask me if I touched it, I will tell you the truth. I didn't. I left it alone until the sun made a shadow around it, and then I moved on. We finished the summer. Nate quit in September to take a job in Maryland. Dee passed her exam and went to days. Kelly said he hadn't seen anything funny in a while and looked relieved not to have anything to roll his eyes at. Serrano kept telling us not to get cute. No one filed a report. What would it say? I still hear the clicking sometimes at my place in Alexandria, when the window AC hits a certain speed. I still carry a coin when I walk at night, which I realized last week is a dumb idea because I don't like the feel of empty pockets now. If I'm driving over the bridge and I glance south, my hands sweat a little even if the air is dry. If the wind's right, you can hear the flagpoles beat their loops against the poles and it sounds like a quiet metronome, like measuring. People ask me now and then if I enjoyed working nights there. I say yes. They say, "See anything?" and smirk like they want a fun story. I say, "Couple of deer." I'm not going to be the person who puts this place into the same bin as haunted house on the highway. It demands more dignity than that. But if you go in the day like most people do and you feel the impulse to cut across a road because your tour group is walking fast, don't. Keep to the path. If you hear metal click in the grass, don't follow. If someone says relieving you, nod and step out of the lane. They were here before you and they'll be here after. Walking the same 21 steps forever between the stones that don't say a name. The last time I was there as a visitor, not staff, I stood near a line of markers that say only unknown and I watched a kid, 8, maybe 9, read the word out loud and frown like it was a puzzle he could solve if he thought hard enough. He reached into his pocket, took out a bright coin and set it gently on the top of the stone. It wobbled a little and then lay flat. He patted it once like you do when you put a cup down and don't want it to spill. As I turned to go, I heard a single click behind me, like the smallest salute in the world. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The coin wasn't for me. The post wasn't mine to understand. I walked out into daylight and the traffic and the ordinary work of living, and I kept my hands steady even though every step to my car lined up a little too neatly. I counted anyway, 1, 2, 3, 21. I never planned to write about this. It feels corny like I'm chasing views or fishing for attention, but I can't get that road out of my head, and my hands won't stop sweating when I drive at night. My brother keeps telling me to talk it out like it's a breakup or something, so I'm putting this here, believe me or don't. I know what I saw on Archer Avenue and I know what was in my car. This all started last January, a little after the new year. I live in Bridgeview, not far from Midway. I was driving rideshare in the evenings after my day job at a small logistics company. Bills were tight, and the company switched to 410s, so I had Mondays off and a couple of later starts. That meant more nights out on the south side. West Lawn, Justice, Summit, the real quiet residential strips, and yeah, Archer Avenue. If you're not local, Archer is the kind of road that makes you check the locks even when the doors are already down. It isn't even that rural. It brushes against forest preserves and old bars with neon signs that cut the dark in knife lines. And it makes long S-curves that feel like you're driving through a memory. In daylight, it's just another stretch that people use to get to I-55. At night, it kind of hums. On Mondays, I'd stop for coffee at a place by the canal before I went online. Maya, a friend from high school, bartended across the street at a Polish place with an arrow-shaped sign. Around 10, she'd take her smoke break and we'd talk in the cold. The kind of cold that sticks inside your nose hairs and makes your lips feel too big. She'd tell me about regulars who watched soccer on full volume with their coats on. I'd tell her which rides were weird but still paid. "You ever see her?" she asked one night, smoke turning to fog in the streetlight. "Who? Come on. Evan told me you take Archer sometimes. The girl in white. Resurrection Mary, the ghost, remember?" I laughed because I had to, because this is Chicago, and the city will eat your checks if you start spending them on superstition. "I've heard the story," I said. "My dad used to tell it to spook us. Hitchhiker, big eyes, vanishes by the cemetery gates, classic." Maya flicked ash. "Driver last week said she got in. Said she smelled like damp leaves. Said she was polite." "Drunk," I said. "He swore he wasn't," she said, then softer. "But he didn't come back." "What does that mean?" "He dropped his shifts," she said. "Wife came in and cashed his tips. He won't drive at night anymore." I told her it was probably just burnout. Then I went online and took a ride out to Bedford Park. The passenger was a TSA guy on his way to the overnight shift. He snored in the back while I grew wide awake looking at every empty shoulder on Archer, thinking about white dresses. I didn't see her that night, but Archer did what Archer does. It filled the car with small noises. My dash cam hissed when I passed St. James Sag Bridge, like the road was wet even though it hadn't snowed in days. The heat clicked like teeth. I didn't like how often I checked the rear view. 3 weeks later, the first weird thing happened. It was a Thursday. I just dropped a guy at a warehouse near Willow Springs and was deadheading back toward the city. My app pinged in that little digital chime I can hear even in my sleep now. A pickup request flashed. Archer and 95th, headed east, 1 passenger. The name on the account was MR, no photo. I accepted, why not? It's money. I made a U and headed back. The app sometimes ghosts you. It'll assign, you'll drive, and then the passenger cancels and you get $3 for your trouble. I half expected that. But the pin stayed steady near a bus shelter where the light was out. The road was empty except for me and a salt truck in the distance causing its own weather. The cold was that special kind that eats through good gloves. It was 1:13 a.m. I remember because I looked at the dashboard clock to keep my brain from casting shadows out of everything. There was a girl at the shelter. Not a kid, like 20, 21, maybe 25. I only saw her when my headlights washed over that dull glass. She was pale. The kind of pale you only get in January or after a long fever. She wore a light-colored dress that hit her calf and a coat that wasn't warm enough for any sane person to be outside in. Her hair looked dark wet, like she'd been caught in a storm. She didn't wave, didn't step forward. She just stood there facing the road, arms at her sides like a statue. I pulled up with the back tires crunching on the crusted snow. My passenger seatbelt light went ding-ding because it always does if anything heavier than an apple hits the seat. It did that now even though nobody had moved yet. "M?" I said through the cracked window. "Do you need a ride?" The girl turned her head. Her eyes were the kind of light that has more gray than blue. She gave me a tight smile, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror once and had kept it ever since. "Are you going toward Archer and Roberts?" she asked. "That's close to the cemetery gates. I can be," I said, and I hit the unlock button. The passenger door didn't open. The back one did, behind me. My phone often hits the mount when people bump it and it fell crooked so the map pointed into my lap. While I fixed it, I felt the weight shift behind me. As if someone sat down carefully, the heater did a useless little sigh. The car smelled like wet wool and something sweet and old, like a perfume from your grandmother's attic. I didn't turn to look. I don't have a good excuse. All I can say is that I didn't want to be the idiot in a movie who peers into the darkness and gives it his full attention. I eased back onto the road. "Thanks," she said. Her voice was normal. That's the thing that disarmed me. She sounded like any student I'd driven, soft and a little tired. "I left my purse. Where at?" I asked. "The ballroom," she said. I glanced at her in the rear view then, but it was angled for the road and my own eyes. I saw a shape like a coat hair, a shoulder. "You mean Willowbrook?" I asked. It burned down. Silence. "Then it's not there anymore?" "Not for a long time," I said. "I'm always last to know," she said, and I might have chuckled if the heat hadn't stopped working for a breath. I fiddled with the dial. The car told me nothing was wrong. When I took my hand off the control, my fingertips stung like I'd touched metal in deep winter. She told me to just go as far as the cemetery. Her voice kept that polite lilt you use with cab drivers when you don't want to be a bother. The road bent. The trees got thicker. I had that sense again of driving through a long black tunnel someone had carved out of old. The salt truck was gone. "That's far enough," she said when the green fence started. "There's a place where the road widens a hair, and cars pull to let trucks pass." Just there, I rolled to a stop and put on my hazards. The gate on that side was chained. A wreath, probably left over from Christmas, hung crooked. The snow had been pushed into dirty little mountain ranges along the curb. No other cars. No other anything. The back door opened. Cold hit the back of my neck. I turned, but it had already shut. The seatbelt light dinged twice like someone had unclicked and then changed their mind. A white shape moved in my peripheral, crossing close to the passenger side. I tried to crank my head around. By the time I got a look, the fence was empty, the road was empty, the sidewalk was empty. My hazards ticked. I kept my foot on the brake without meaning to. I didn't call out. I didn't get out. I just sat and listened to my own breathing. The scent of wet wool was stronger now, like it had been rubbed into the passenger seat. The digital chime from my app made me jump. The trip ended with a beep. Under tip, there was just a dash. I told my brother Evan the next day. He's a paramedic and he's used to people saying strange things after bad nights. So what? He said when I'd gotten through it and was out of words. You picked up a girl who walked away. That's 90% of rides in winter. You want the other 10%? The ones who puke, I said. She asked for Willowbrook, he swatted that away. Half the old-timers still call it that. You know how many patients we get who call Little Company the new St. Bees? The building's gone. It doesn't mean the name is. Her account, I said. It just said MR. Lots of folks don't set their names, he said. It's either that or something like iPad of George. Okay, I told him. Probably nothing. But I didn't tell him how my dash cam had half a minute of hiss where the ride should have started. All the footage around it was fine, just that chunk where the screen went milky gray like it was looking through breath on a window. I watched it 3 times and made myself shut the laptop like I was leaving a room. The next ride request from MR came on a Sunday after the playoffs. Same pickup area. I hit decline before I even finished seeing the map blossom out. Maya texted me later that night. You alive? I said yes. She sent back, good, things started. I don't want to say escalating. That makes it sound like a movie. But the road made itself known to me. I'd take a rider to Summit and then I'd get a ping to go back to Archer, and my tank would be at just that level where I felt stupid saying no. I'd see a girl walking in the dark. Not always white, sometimes just a light jacket, hair down or hair up, and I'd slow because it's Chicago and that's what you do when you see someone who looks too cold to be outside. It wasn't always her. It was never her. But every time my seatbelt light would go ding, ding, ding until my hand hovered over the air like I was offering my car to the night. Once I drove past the cemetery at 2:22 a.m. I know, funny. And my radio, which was set to Bluetooth because I was listening to a podcast, popped to an AM station with music from somewhere else in time. A female singer with a thin voice and a big room around her. That echo you don't get anymore. The song was about the moon. The receiver wasn't even on that band. It stayed for a few bars and then popped back to my Bluetooth, where 2 guys were arguing about football. My heart knocked so hard it threw sweat up my spine. I told myself to take different roads, Harlem instead of Archer, 63rd instead of 55th. Stay close to the city glow where it can't touch you as easily. I kept telling myself that on the nights the app paid better on Archer, and I kept ignoring myself. The night I picked her up again was in March, after the slush finally turned into dirty, half-dead grass. I was running late because of a detour, and the green light by the bridge stalled and then shivered its way back to a normal glow. I just dropped a woman at a townhouse near Summit. Her perfume stayed in the car, new and glossy. It wasn't a bad smell, and I let it sit there like a fake friend. I was thinking about going home early. It was 12:40 a.m. ping, MR. Again. Same direction, not the exact same pin, but it might as well have been. I stared at it too long and my fingers accepted it out of habit. By the time my brain said no, my car was already nudging toward the left turn. The shoulder near the cemetery had no one. I checked my mirror, checked it again. I was about to cancel when the back door opened, like it had been waiting for my indecision to crack. A weight shifted in the rear seat. The seatbelt light dinged and then fell quiet like something settled properly into the latch. I'm sorry, she said from behind me. Same soft voice. I didn't mean to make you wait. You didn't, I said. The heater had been running warm. My breath still misted for a second and then vanished like the air decided to relent, like it approved of her. The scent of the earlier passenger stepped backward in my nose, replaced by wet wool and something old sweet I couldn't name. Not a grandma smell anymore, more like the idea of a corsage. Where to, I asked. I heard my own voice doing that thing where you're too gentle with a skittish animal. You know, she said. Just as before. You can set it in the app, I said, because I'm stupid sometimes. I don't have it, she said, and I looked down. The screen showed a navigation line ending just ahead near the gate, exactly as it had the last time. The little blue car icon sat like a mouth waiting to eat itself. Okay, I said. I signaled even though there was no one. The habit felt like a rope I could hold. She didn't speak. The car seemed quieter than it had any right to be, like my tires were gliding and not biting the road. I checked the rear view because that's what I'd promised myself I'd do this time. I angled it so I could see more of the seat. The glass caught a shape, a pale oval where a face might be, dark hair, a line of shoulder. Not detailed, not empty, something. It wavered a little like heat off asphalt in a mirage. "Did you ever go dancing there?" she asked. "At Willowbrook," I said. "No. Not you," she said like she was clearing me of a charge. "Anyone. People used to go there after they fought. They thought dancing would fix it." "It doesn't," I said, and I heard myself sounding older than I am. She made a small sound that might have been a laugh. "I was supposed to be home sooner," she said. "My mother—" "Never mind. What's your name?" I asked. I don't know why. Maybe because names make people real. Maybe because if you can name something, it has edges you can hold. She gave me a smile through the rear view that didn't touch anything except her mouth. "I told you." "You didn't," I said. "Last time you didn't." "My mother calls me Mary," she said. And even writing that makes my neck go hot in the way that's too close to cold. It was the first time I wanted to pull over and tell something I couldn't see to get out of my car. But the fence was right there. The gate was a dark mouth with a key between its teeth. I put on my hazards without thinking. We rolled to a stop in a place that looked exactly like the place from before and exactly like any other stretch of Archer where you can pretend the world is 2 lanes and your engine and a chain link line. "This is fine," she said. "You should keep moving." "I'll wait," I said, which was not normal. If a living rider told me to leave them by a chain fence at 1 a.m. on a road with no lights, I'd say no and mean it. But she was different, or I was. "Do you need—" My phone lit up with a call from Evan. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The screen scrolled out a voicemail as if the phone wanted to keep me tethered to something solid. "Accident near Archer," the transcribe garbled. "We're close, then. You okay?" I stared at it and then at the road and then at the rear view. The back seat was empty. Not gone in a flash empty. Not movie magic empty. Empty like someone had let go of a breath and stepped out. And the indentation in the seat was already forgetting its lesson. My passenger seatbelt light dinged once like a bell at the end of a round. The car fogged for a second along the rear window as if a body had just moved away. The doors stayed shut, no latch. No sound. The perfume was gone, all of it, even the earlier passenger. I was alone with my hazards clicking like a metronome for a dying orchestra. I blamed the light for what I saw next. A pale shape near the fence standing in the gap between 2 trees. It was like my headlights were pouring over a human-shaped dent in the night. Hair, coat, dress. She had one hand lifted like she might hitch a ride again, except the hand was pointed down, not up. A car approached from the other direction. For the first time, maybe all night, I heard an engine that wasn't mine. I turned my head because, witnesses. A sedan floated past, slowed, and then the driver's face did that quick rubber change people make when they're arguing with themselves. It kept going anyway, past us toward the bend. I don't know if I would have stayed. I don't know if I would have driven away. I didn't get to know because my radio cracked, the way it does when you drive under power lines or when the dispatch of something else bleeds through. Evan's voice came through clear like he was sitting in my passenger seat. He was speaking over his own radio to someone else. "We're coming up on Archer. Report said female on foot near the cemetery wearing light clothing. Possible hypothermia." I swore and grabbed for my phone. I called him. It rang once, twice, and then he answered in that split voice people use when they're already doing 3 things. "You good?" he asked. "I'm on Archer," I said. "By resurrection." "Don't stop," he said, immediate. "Get off the shoulder." Someone hit a patch back there. "We got a car into the divider near Roberts. I'll call you after." "There's a woman," I said before I could stop myself. "She." And then I heard myself like an echo that was older than my throat and felt stupid. He must have too because he changed his tone and used my name. "Daniel," he said, patient. "Move," so I put the car in drive. The headlights washed over the fence. For a second, I saw her face in the reflection of my own bright. The way glass gives you an outline that isn't quite your own. She was not smiling, not angry, just waiting. I pulled away. In the mirror, the gate swung a fraction in the night wind. No one stood there. I took Roberts to Archer and tried to breathe normally. I told myself I'd go home. 2 blocks later, traffic slowed. There were red and blue lights flickering over the bark of the trees and ambulances with their rear doors open like mouths. I pulled into a lot and texted Evan, "I'm at the strip plaza." He didn't answer. He was busy. I watched the scene for too long, the way people do, even when they're ashamed of themselves. I finally went home and tried the adult thing. Shower, bed, lights off, a promise to ignore the next ping. My phone vibrated anyway. A new trip ended on my driver history. I hadn't taken it. I was in sweatpants. The passenger's initial was a single M-tip. The pickup time matched the 30 minutes I'd been parked staring at an empty lot with my headlights on the closed business windows. The drop was the gate. I showed Maya the next day. She stared at my screen like it might sprout teeth. Could be a glitch, she said. You know the app acts up. Yeah, I said. It does. I didn't tell her that in the middle of that ghost ride I'd gotten a text thanking me for being a 5-star driver and asking me to rate Mary. The link had led to a dead page. When I tried to show it to Evan later, it took me to an error that said the ride didn't exist. 2 weeks went by. I didn't avoid Archer, but I took it less. I made jokes because that's how you build walls when the cold air owns your vents. Evan told me some accident stories, real ones, and tried to give me perspective. Bodies make people tell stories, he said. You'd be surprised what they invent to give it a shape. Believed him because he's seen things I won't. It helped until it didn't. I started getting little things in the car that didn't belong to anyone I could name. A bobby pin in the back carpet. A paper matchbook with a logo from a bar that closed when my parents were in grade school. A ticket stub that just said Admit 1 in plain black letters, no movie, no theater. Thick paper that made me think of old photocopies. I cleaned them out. The next night something else would be there. Not a lot, just one thing. Like crumbs leading back to a story someone wants you to retell a certain way. The last time I saw her was in April, just as the trees were insulting us with the first hints of green. It had rained hard at sunset, the kind of rain that makes the drainage fail and cars inch like boats. By midnight it was clear. A fog grew from every grassy strip like the ground was exhaling. I'd finished a run from Midway and cut across to Archer for no good reason, except that some roads feel like shortcuts even when they aren't. There was a woman on the shoulder by the gates again. And yes, if you're counting, that's cliché. But life uses clichés more than movies do because they're easy and fast. She was not wearing a white dress this time. She had a skirt and a sweater and a coat that might have belonged to someone taller. Her hair was pinned up. She had bare calves that made me cold for her. She raised her hand, palm down. Not a wave. A request. I stopped because of course I did. The back door opened and closed with the behavior of my own doors. The weight settled. The seatbelt light ding ticked off. The wet wool corsage smell was faint, like it remembered me too. Hi, she said, like we were neighbors who had gradually become less shy. You okay? I said. She laughed. Are you? We pulled out. The road before the cemetery stretches in a way that makes every speed feel like 10 miles slower than it is. My hands sat at 10 and 2 like I was passing a test. If there was music, I don't remember it. The car sounded like it had been placed on the road rather than driving on it. I never make it home on time, she said. I think I always mean to. I don't want to worry anyone, The air felt nice. Tonight? I asked. Then, she said. The word was tiny and heavy. The wind made the dress snap like a flag. You could feel the music out there. They opened the doors because it was too hot inside. People still talk about you, I said, and immediately wished I hadn't. It felt gross, like telling someone they're a meme. People always talk, she said, almost kind. They like stories better than they like people. People do things like eat and sleep and forget to call. Stories stay where you put them. I'm not trying to... I started and then stopped because I didn't know what I wasn't trying to do. You can leave me by the gate, she said. It's a good place to stop. We rolled forward. My headlights caught the metal and made it look clean. A plastic bouquet someone had wired to the fence moved slightly in no wind. The car eased to a stop. I flipped my hazards because my hands were ahead of me. I looked in the mirror and saw her face, just enough of it to know she was looking back, and I did the worst, most human thing. I tried to fix it. Do you want me to call someone? I asked. Your mom? A friend? I can wait with you. My mother sleeps with the radio on, she said, so the house won't be quiet when I'm not there. She reached forward. I felt her hand rest on my wrist. It wasn't ice. It wasn't heat. It was the exact temperature of the moment before you realize you're shivering. You should go, she said, before you see something you don't want to explain. What does that mean? I asked, and I think I meant it like a joke, but my voice didn't get the memo. It meant this. Blinking red and blue in the far distance. A car horn that had been held down by a weight, fixed in a position its driver no longer controlled. A siren too far to belong to this road and time. It meant the way the fog scrapes into shapes if you stare hard enough. It meant a figure in the road behind me where a shoulder should be. Only when I blinked, the road was just a road again. It meant how every cell in me leaned toward looking and how some small voice kept saying, "Don't, don't, don't." Her hand lifted. The pressure left my wrist. The back door didn't sound. The seatbelt ding happened anyway, as if a bell somewhere in the car had learned what she was and wanted to participate. I put the car in drive. The radio failed to a husk of signal, and then returned to the podcast it had left like a friend who'd gone to the bathroom and come back, unbothered. I didn't look until the fence was in the mirror. I didn't want to, I swear to you. I don't know what made me. The mirror gave me myself and the gate and the night, and for a slice of a second, the shape of a girl where a girl might be, half turned like she was going to speak to someone standing just a step behind my bumper. Her mouth moved just a little. And if I had to guess, if you put a light in my face and made me say it, I'd say she whispered, "Sorry." I went home by a route that stayed loud and ugly. Cicero, 63rd, even Pulaski with its lights like awake eyes. I left the car running in the driveway because the idea of shutting it down felt like putting a period on a sentence I didn't want. Inside, I found a damp circle on my wrist where her hand had been. Not wet exactly, but like a cold glass had sat there for a moment, and then been moved. I went to wash it off because superstition is stupid until it's not. The skin under it looked normal. My pulse jumped under my fingers like an animal. Evan called me an hour later. "We had one," he said. "By Archer. Guy hit the divider, drunk or exhausted, I don't know. He's okay. No fatalities. Before you ask. He knows me." "Good," I said. "You good?" he asked. "No," I said. "But later." I slept badly and woke up with the feeling that my car was still idling outside the bedroom window even though it wasn't. The next afternoon, I caved and did the thing you should never do if you want to function. I searched forums and old stories and the kind of YouTube channels that use red text on their thumbnails. I watched a man tell the story of a hitchhiker who disappears at the gates with a smile that was too casual for the way his hands held the mic. I read a post where someone thought they saw a girl in a photo taken by their dash cam, a pale slash in the grain that looked like an arm and not like a glare. I thought about not driving nights anymore. We can all say we'll change, but money has its own gravity. I told myself I'd take the city streets, stick to closer runs, refuse any MR that popped up. I told myself a lot. This is the part where I could tell you I haven't seen her since, and the story ends like a campfire, people getting up to shake off the ash and laugh too loud. That would be comforting. It isn't true. 2 nights ago I drove on Archer because a pickup pinged me close to Summit with a double fare. The app glitched just long enough to take me past the point where turning around made less sense than continuing. I told myself to think about something else. That's when the passenger seatbelt light went off with the smallest, most definite ding, and then stayed quiet like someone had sat there and decided to be good this time. It stayed off until I passed the gates. Then it dinged twice and went back to doing what it always does, scolding me for groceries, for backpacks, for no reason at all. If you want something practical from this, I don't have it. I don't have a recording that shows a face through the fog. I don't have hair or a footprint or a timestamp that proves anything except that algorithms like to mess with us. I have a smell I could probably identify in a police lineup in the sense that some roads keep their own time, and sometimes invite you to visit it. I still drive nights. I try not to slow for anyone who might be a coat on a hanger, something your brain puts arms into because it can't stand emptiness. I don't always succeed. When I pass Resurrection Cemetery, I touch my wrist without thinking. If the gate is open, I look away. If the gate is shut, I look away. If my radio flips to the old songs, I turn it off and hum something stupid to chase the echo. Last night, after a late airport run, I cut down Archer because the highway was clogged. It was 2-something in the morning, and the fog had that low look like it's lying on the road, not floating above it. I talked out loud to myself about nothing, narrating the trip like I was on the phone. Anything to keep my ears from digging new holes to hide worries in. When the seatbelt light dinged and then went quiet, I said, "I can't help you." My voice sounded not like a driver's, not like a man's. It sounded like a hallway. The car didn't answer because cars don't. I kept going. At the gates, no one stood there. The fence looked like a line drawn by a child who refuses a ruler. My hazard switch felt too close to my thumb. I didn't touch it. I passed and thought about speed limits. I breathed with the turn signal's rhythm. At the next light, no one crossed. The next, the same. The next, a man in a hoodie who didn't look up. The city collected itself again. The radio stayed where I'd put it. My phone, face down, didn't pulse with any ghost rides. Still, when I pulled into my lot at home and killed the engine, the seat creaked on my right like something small had leaned forward and then settled back. Like a passenger remembering she'd left nothing with me. I sat in the dark a long time. The neighborhood was quiet in that way where you hear the thrum miles away on the highway instead of anything near. I swallowed against the dryness that comes when the heat finally leaves the vents. I waited for the smell that sometimes comes and sometimes doesn't. It didn't, it was just my car. Before I went in, I checked the back seat because you always do, and because maybe I wanted to be reassured by emptiness. There was a matchbook on the floor. The logo said a name I didn't know in a script font that's not cool anymore. When I came back out with my phone to take a picture, it was gone. I won't ask for advice. I know what some people say you're supposed to do. Never pick up hitchhikers, bless your car, talk to priests, apologize at the gate, learn the right song, and sing it. I won't ask if you believe me either. That's not why I'm writing this. I think I just wanted to set the story down somewhere outside my own head. Like a glass you put on the table because your hand is tired of holding it. If you drive Archer late, keep your eyes on the road. If you see a girl in a light dress, you don't have to be a hero. Just remember your blinker and your breath. And if your seatbelt light goes off by itself, don't try to explain it. Some things are there whether you name them or not. Some rides you take and some rides take you. I'm home now. I'm going to sleep. If I dream of a ballroom with the doors thrown open and the night spilling in, I'm going to turn my head and look at the floor. If someone says sorry in a voice I can almost place, I'm going to say sorry back. And when I wake up, if the smell of wet wool lingers in the room for a second too long, I'll open the window and let the cold in, because the cold knows the way out, and I don't. I used to think cemetery legends were something you sell to tourists, not something you live. Last August, when the heat in Savannah stuck to you like a wet shirt, I learned otherwise. I was 27, picking up shifts for a small ghost tour company that ran out of a brick storefront on Broughton Street. We weren't one of the flashy ones with costumed actors and fog machines. It was just me, a flashlight, and a laminated map. On days when I wasn't leading groups, I took photos for the company's Instagram. The owner, Marta, mid-30s, hair in a bandana, always chewing on the same piece of gum, liked authentic. She sent me to quiet corners tourists missed. No posing with trolley tours, she said. Find the places that feel like the city is breathing around you. That's how I started going to Bonaventure Cemetery by myself on weekday afternoons. If you've never been, it stretches along a bluff above the Wilmington River. Live oaks bending over the paths like old men with secrets. Spanish moss draped from the branches like gray shawls. The air there doesn't move. It's heavy and patient. Even the bugs sound bored. I heard about the whispering angel from a woman at the coffee shop across the street from our office. She was flipping through one of those local ghost story paperbacks. I made some joke about how I should get a commission for every orb someone circled on their iPhone photos after my tour. "You know the angel at Bonaventure?" she asked without looking up. "Which one?" I said. "There are a lot of angels. The one leaning over the child's grave. If you put your ear to her mouth, she'll tell you something. Prayers if you're good. Warnings if you're not." She finally looked at me and smiled. "Sometimes she just says your name." "Who told you that?" I asked. "My grandma," she said, like that answered everything. I filed it away as material I might use if a tour ran short, but it stuck in my head for another reason. My friend Tessa was coming to visit that weekend. She and I had gone to college together in North Carolina and kept in touch. She's the kind of person who reads every placard in a museum and remembers the one line that gives you chills at 2 a.m. I knew she'd want to see Bonaventure. I figured we could look for the angel, take some photos, and if we didn't find anything, no harm done. Tessa arrived on a Friday with a duffel bag and a cheap paper fan she opened and closed constantly. I picked her up from the Greyhound station, and we grabbed lunch at a place that served fried green tomatoes the size of your hand. At the last minute, my co-worker Jamal asked if he could tag along. He'd grown up in Savannah and liked to make fun of me for acting like an explorer in his hometown. He also liked Tessa. He brought a bottle of water and a packet of peanut butter crackers because Jamal is practical like that. Rules, he said, tapping the map I'd printed. We don't climb anything. We don't touch anything. We don't leave anything. We don't take anything. You say that now, Tessa said, opening her fan with a snap. Wait till you see a penny balanced on a statue's nose and get the urge to test physics. By the time we parked under the oaks, the heat had become a separate organism. It pressed in, thick and mossy, smelling faintly of river and old stone. A grounds crew drove by in a golf cart and lifted 2 fingers from the steering wheel. A sign near the gate read, in friendly font, "Please respect quiet hours." Another sign, less friendly, said gates lock at 6 p.m. We'll be out by 5, I said automatically. My phone showed 3:12. We walked the path down the middle, passing angels with weathered noses, marble lambs perched on little pedestals, names that sounded like they belonged to ballrooms and battleships. Tessa stopped at almost every grave to read the epitaphs. Jamal pointed out the family names he recognized from streets. I took photos that tried to make the heat look like a filter instead of a fact. Which one is it? Tessa asked after a while. Your whispering friend? I don't know, I admitted. All I have is a description and an attitude. We wandered into one of the older sections where the ground tilted toward the bluff. The grass was patchy there, and the roots of the oaks pushed up the soil in slow-motion humps. That's where we saw her. She wasn't grand. That was my first impression. She was life-size at most, slightly smaller, carved from stone that had darkened to a soft gray, like the underside of a dove's wing. The angel leaned over a small figure on the pedestal beneath her, child-sized, hands folded. The angel's hair was pulled back, her head bent, her mouth open just enough to see the shadow of it. Her wings were tucked tight, like she was bracing against a wind that had stopped a long time ago. The base of the statue had a name, Eliza Ashby. Below that, in smaller letters, born Sept. 3, 1886, died Jan. 1, 1894. And then a line of text that looked like it had been added later, a different hand. She sleeps. The angel keeps watch. People had left little offerings along the base, coins, a plastic bracelet, a paper crane, a pink ribbon tied around a bit of iron fencing. Someone had tucked a peppermint candy into a crack at the angel's elbow. The wrapper had stuck to the stone like a wart. There she is, Tessa whispered, not at the statue but at her own goosebumps. She did that thing where you rub your arms like you can smooth them down. Careful, Jamal said, but he was smiling. Tourists swear if you put your ear up to her, you'll hear her breathe. Wind does weird things through the moss. Which part? Tessa asked. The breathe or the wind? The wind, he said. And don't put your ear on anything. That's rule number 5. We stood there longer than we meant to. It's strange how a piece of stone can pin you in place. I kept expecting a tour group to clatter by, but it was quiet. Somewhere out toward the river, a boat engine coughed and settled. A crow said something rude. The air between the angel's mouth and the child's face felt crowded like a closet before you open it. A woman came down the path with a tote bag and one of those handheld fans that plug into your phone. She nodded to us, then stopped in front of the statue and crossed herself. She took a pink ribbon from her bag and tied it next to the old one. She placed a small plastic horse by the name Eliza and touched the angel's wrist with 2 fingers. Before she left, she leaned in close, closer than I would put my face to, anything in August, and tilted her ear toward the angel's mouth. She listened for maybe 5 seconds. Whatever she heard made her eyes go bright. Not happy bright, not sad either, just seen. When she straightened up, she mouthed, "Thank you," and walked away. We watched her disappear among the stones. Well, Tessa said, I didn't bring a ribbon. You brought curiosity, which is apparently free to the public, Jamal said, but he didn't make a move to leave. It felt stupid to suggest it, so I didn't. Tessa did. Let's just listen, she said. We won't touch, 5 seconds each. If it's weird, we stop. That's the most Tessa thing I've ever heard, I said. We'll do 5 seconds, and if it's weird, we'll do 10. Jamal gave me a look that meant you're going to do it anyway, so, okay. Tessa went first. She tucked her hair behind her ear and leaned in, careful not to touch the stone. For a second, I thought maybe she'd prank us and say something dramatic, but she just stood there, her fan closed at her side. After about 5 heartbeats, she stepped back. The color had left her cheeks. She didn't say anything. "What?" I asked. She shrugged too quickly. "Nothing. It's wind. It's just wind." Jamal rolled his eyes and leaned in. He squeezed his eyes shut like he was bracing for a splash and counted out loud under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When he straightened, the corners of his mouth were tight. "I heard something," he admitted. "Could be anything." He forced a laugh. "Probably some kid hit a Bluetooth speaker." Then it was my turn. I didn't want to do it, which made me want to do it more. I stepped up, bent at the waist, and put my ear where theirs had been. The stone smelled like rain even though there hadn't been any for days. I counted in my head and tried to listen the way you listen for your name in a noisy room. On 4, I heard it. It wasn't a voice like a person talking. It was like the sound a word makes before it becomes a word, the shape of breath. It slipped under the heat and went straight into my ear. It didn't travel through my skull the way bass does. It felt like it came out of me and met itself right there. The sound formed a syllable, and then the syllable was the whole world. "Evan," it said. I jerked back so fast I knocked my shoulder on Tessa's fan. "You okay?" she asked, steadying me. "It said my name," I said, immediately hating how it sounded. "No, not said. I heard my name." Jamal tilted his head. "I got a sentence," he said. It sounded like "you shouldn't have come back." He tried to make it a joke. "But they say that at every bar downtown, too." Tessa stared at the angel's mouth. Mine was... "Don't let him lock it." "Lock what?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know." "The car? The gate? My brain?" A cloud moved over the sun and everything went a little dimmer. I checked the time, 4:02. "Let's walk a little," Jamal said, more to the air than to us. "Get some distance and see if the spell wears off." We picked a path that looked like it would loop us back toward the entrance. The oaks leaned in closer here and the moss hung lower, brushing our arms with little wet kisses. The graves were older, the names less familiar. A family plot enclosed by an iron fence had a sign on it, "Do not enter the family area." Someone had hung a faded red ribbon on the latch. Another plot had shells arranged on the headstones. Tessa pointed quietly and mouthed, "Later, Google that." I kept hearing my name. Not out loud, not the way the angel said it or didn't say it, but like the air was full of it. Like the way you hear your phone buzz when it hasn't. I tried to tell myself it was just my brain echoing the weirdness. The path looked the same no matter which way we turned. Twice we came to a fork, chose left, and ended up at the same stone bench with the same cracked water bottle sitting on it. "We're not lost," Jamal said, "which is what you say when you are a little lost but not panicking yet. We're just taking the scenic route." A golf cart hummed somewhere to our right. We followed the sound and came out near a brick building with a porch. A sign said "Office." The porch had a pegboard with keys hung on it. Big keys, old and new, each labeled with a bit of tape. Rivergate Main Section H. Some were duplicate copies with a red dot sticker. A box fan rattled in the doorway, but nobody was inside. A man walked up the path from the other direction. He was older, late 60s maybe, with a sunburn across his nose and a faded baseball cap that said Bonaventure in threadbare letters. A ring of keys hung from his belt. "You folks need directions?" he asked, voice easy but watchful. "We're just headed out," Jamal said. "Didn't mean to wander so far." "You and everybody who sets foot in here," he said, smiling without showing teeth. "Name's Hargrave. They got me locking up till they fill a position. 6 o'clock they close the gates." "You don't want to be on the wrong side of that?" "Don't let him lock it," Tessa said under her breath without realizing she'd said it. Hargrave's eyes flicked to her. "Something I can help you with?" he asked. "Do you know where the Whispering Angel is?" I asked, because subtle has never been my thing. Hargrave's mouth made a shape like he was about to spit and decided not to. "People leave too many things on that one," he said after a second. "Attracts raccoons." "You didn't take anything, did you?" "No," I said. "We just looked." "Listened, I guess," he nodded once. "Well, don't listen too close. Moss grows on whatever stands still long enough." He told us a more direct path to the entrance. It involved hugging the bluff and ignoring the first left, taking the second. We thanked him. He touched the brim of his cap and walked up to the porch. We'd gone maybe 30 yards when I heard keys jingle behind us. The sound was impossible not to hear now, like a bell rung for dogs in a different room. I glanced back once and saw Hargrave standing on the porch, looking out over the graves like he was counting them. He had his hand on the pegboard. He wasn't touching any of the keys, but 3 of them swayed anyway. We moved faster. The path did what he said it would for about 5 minutes, and then it didn't. We reached a curve that should have given us a view of the iron entrance gate. Instead, we saw water, a strip of it shining through the trees. The river. The path curved toward it and disappeared under a tangle of roots. Jamal checked the time. "It's 5:31. Plenty of time," Tessa said, which is also the thing you say when you want it to be true so badly you try to make it true by saying it. We tried another path. The sign said Section K and pointed in a direction that didn't exist. We passed a white marble angel with one wing broken. I knew we'd passed it earlier because Tessa had said something about how it looked like it was shrugging. It shrugged at us again, same moss stain on its cheek like a tear that never dries. A man in a polo shirt and cargo shorts jogged by with earbuds in, eyes focused straight ahead. He didn't look at us. I called out, "Hey, is the main gate this way?" He didn't react. He was gone around a curve in 3 steps, silent as if the air had swallowed him. "What is happening?" Tessa asked, and not in the excited way. The heat made sound weird. It swallowed distance and stretched near things out like gum. Somewhere a lawnmower was running, but it sounded like it was inside my chest. The only clear sound was the occasional clink of coin against coin behind us, soft and insistent, like someone turning a handful of change over and over in their palm. "You hearing that?" Jamal asked finally. "Yeah," I said. "It's probably nothing." "It's not nothing," Tessa said. "It's like," she stopped, "like it's trying to get us to look back. We didn't. Or we told ourselves we wouldn't." Then the sound moved, not behind us but off to the side, and it felt like the angle of the air changed. It's hard to describe that. You just know when you're being lined up with something. We came to a split in the path. The sign for Section C hung crooked. The coin sound settled. Tap, soft tap off to the left. "This is stupid," Jamal said and turned right. We walked 3 minutes and ended up at the Whispering Angel again. The offerings were arranged differently. The peppermint wrapper was gone. A new ribbon had been tied near the first pink one, this one a pale blue. A penny stood on its edge, balancing, something that shouldn't happen in the thick heat that melted everything into soft edges. "Okay," I said, my voice trying to be normal and not sticking the landing. "We go to the office. We find Hargrave. We get walked out by someone who knows the place so well they could do it in their sleep." "You said that like it's the scary part," Tessa said. We headed back toward the office. On the way, a low voice reached us from the path behind, deep and patient. "Folks," it called, "you're cutting it close." I looked back and saw Hargrave, keys at his belt, the brim of his cap casting a strip of shadow over his eyes. "Rivergate's easier at this hour," he said. "Main gets sticky. Come on." "We're good," Jamal said, polite but firm. "We'll take Main." Hargrave's smile didn't move, but the skin around it did. "Suit yourselves," he said, and let us pass. As we walked away, the coin sound started up again. Not behind us this time, but in front, leading. It matched our steps. Clink when our feet hit the ground, stop when we stopped. At the office, the porch was empty. The fan still rattled. The pegboard of keys looked fuller than I remembered. I don't know how to explain that. It looked like a mouth with new teeth. A note on the counter said back in 10 in neat block letters. No clock to tell us when 10 had started. What if she meant this? Tessa said suddenly. "Who?" "The angel. Don't let him lock it." What if she meant the gate? "The office?" She stopped, pointed. On the pegboard, one of the keys was bigger than the rest. Iron with a loop at the top like an old ship key in a movie. The label read Rivergate in the same neat tape handwriting, but the tape was older, yellowing at the edges. "I am not taking a key," Jamal said, horrified. "That is a crime." "We'll bring it right back," Tessa said. "We just open the gate and leave it there for him." "And if there's anything Netflix has taught me," I said, "it's that breaking into a cemetery to break out of a cemetery is a great alibi." A gust of hotter air came through the door like the building had breathed on us. The coin sound stopped, then clinked twice. If that doesn't make sense to you, that's how it felt. It felt like a signal. I heard my name. This time faint, like the last bubble in a pot when you turn off the heat. Evan, the voice that time wasn't the angel. It was a grown voice. Calm. Folks, it said again from outside. Rivergate. I turned and Hargrave was there at the bottom of the steps, 1 foot on the first stair like he'd always been in motion. He looked taller than before. Or maybe the porch had sunk. He held up his ring of keys and it sounded like rain over coins. You don't want Maine, he said. Trust me. It sticks. How do you know our names? Tessa asked him flatly. He tapped the brim of his cap. I don't, he said, but I can guess a few. Everything in my body wanted to be out. That is not a heroic sentence, but it's the true one. I reached up and took the iron key labeled Rivergate. It was heavier than it looked. The air got heavier too, like the key had weight even when you weren't holding it. Don't, Jamal said. He didn't stop me. None of us stopped me. Hargrave smiled without warmth. Follow me, he said, and turned. We followed him at a distance we pretended was comfortable. He moved like he didn't have to pick where to put his feet. The paths did it for him. Every time we came to a turn, he didn't look. He just leaned and kept talking over his shoulder about how people come in here with no water and flip-flops and then act surprised when their phones die. He was telling a story I could recite too, Marta's authentic voiceover, but it didn't fit his mouth. The words felt like they'd been typed and handed to him. We reached a narrow path that ran along the bluff. The river was close enough to smell. It smelled like old pennies. The gate stood at the end, iron bars tied with a chain and a simple lock. The sign on it said, employees only, no public access. Hargrave stopped a few feet short. I'll let you do the honors, he said, and stayed where the path widened, not coming closer, not getting his shoes dusty. Jamal looked at me like we were in a room with a sleeping bear and I'd decided to poke it. Hurry, he said. I fit the key into the lock, expecting to have to jiggle it, cursed jiggle again. It slid in like it had been waiting. The chain went slack with a sigh. I pushed the gate. It opened enough for one person at a time, see? Hargrave said, voice smooth. Easy. Behind me, Tessa whispered, don't sign. I didn't know what she meant. She didn't either. That's what she told me later. It just came out of her mouth like she was reading it. The air around us felt like a mouth forming a new word. We slipped through the gap and out onto the maintenance road that curved down toward the river, and then around to the visitor lot. We could see the tops of cars through the trees. We could also see water pooled across the road, ankle deep at first, then shin, then more, where the river had reached up over the bank to taste the high ground. The heat had hoarded the afternoon into a thunderstorm somewhere we couldn't see yet. We should go back, Jamal said. Take Maine. I looked through the gate. Hargrave hadn't moved. He was watching us with the calm of a person on their front porch watching squirrels argue. Maine's sticky today, he repeated. You'll like the river. That's when the whisper came again. Not from the gate. Not from the river. Not from inside my head. It came from the space between the angel's mouth and the child's face a quarter mile away, and from every place a name is stored, and from nowhere. It said in the same not language that had shaped my name earlier. Not that voice, it wasn't a command. It wasn't even a sentence. It was a correction. Go, Tessa said through her teeth. She grabbed my hand with a strength that hurt. The water was cold, a shock after all that heat. It made my ankles ache. We used the chain link fence to balance as we moved. The road dipped, then rose. In the dip, the water came up to my knees. Something small brushed my calf and I yelled. It was probably just a twig. It felt like a hand. We got to the dry part and didn't stop to wring out our shoes. The coin sound followed us in little flurries, then went still, then came again like someone keeping pace. I didn't look back. I swear I didn't, but I still know somehow. Like you know what the weather is doing behind you without turning, that Hargrave was still standing by the gate as we reached the lot and the light went flatter with the storm building. We drove away with the windows down and the air finally moving, tasting like the river and tin and stone. No one spoke until we were on Victory Drive. Live oaks whipping past like a film on fast forward. Then Jamal said, You put the key back, right? I looked at my hand. It still held the iron key. I hadn't even realized. My fingers were dented where the loop pressed into them. Turn around, Tessa said. Tomorrow, I said. I'll bring it first thing in the morning. The office was unattended. I'll put it on the peg and leave a note. Or we keep it, Jamal said, too dry. A haunted key that opens something you don't want to open. We didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the curve of the angel's mouth and the space between it and the child's face. It felt like a place you could fall into. I kept hearing rain that wasn't there, not real rain. Coins. In the morning, I drove back alone because I told myself I had to. The storm had thrown branches everywhere, but the sky over the cemetery was clear, knocked clean. The sign said gates open 8 a.m. It was 8:11. A different man was on the porch of the office. He was younger, 30s maybe, with a clipboard and a tired smile. "Can I help you?" he asked. I borrowed a key and I wanted to put it back," I said, holding up the river gate key like a dog bringing back a stolen shoe. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, honestly confused. "Off your pegboard yesterday," I said. "Hargrave said we could take the river gate." The man looked over his shoulder into the office where the pegboard hung exactly as before, labels neat, keys in rows. He looked back at me. "We haven't had a Hargrave here in a year and a half," he said. "Mr. Hargrave retired. He lives out in Pooler. Nice guy. His daughter brings him by sometimes. But he doesn't work here." "I talked to him," I said, feeling my mouth pull down into something childish and stubborn. "You can leave the key," the man said gently, like he'd seen the wobble in my voice and decided to steer around it. "I'll make sure it gets to the right place." I hung the key on the hook labeled Rivergate. It fit like it belonged there. As I turned to go, the man said, "You know we don't like folks in Section K after 5. The ground's uneven. Hard to see. People get turned around." "We noticed," I said. He hesitated. "You hear anything?" It was such a strange question that I laughed. "It told me my name," I said, and I wasn't sure until I heard myself whether I was making a joke or telling the truth. "Mine told me not to sign," he said, and then flushed like he'd said too much. Years back, first week on the job, I was closing up alone and never mind. "Y'all have a good morning." I walked back out under the oaks. I told myself I was not going to the angel. I went to the angel. She looked the same. Of course she did. The offerings were different again. The peppermint was back. There were more coins organized into a little pattern like a hopscotch board. A new ribbon, green this time, hung with the pink and the blue. Someone had placed a tiny, cheap plastic tiara on the base and angled it toward the names. I stood there until the air felt like it had decided something. Then I leaned in. Not too close, the way you lean toward a friend who is about to tell you something important in a loud room. I didn't ask a question out loud. In my head I said, "Thank you." In my head I said, "I'll tell people to be careful." I said, "I'll tell people to listen when a thing tells you not that voice." There wasn't an answer at first. Then there was a sound like change in a pocket moving. And beneath that, a breath that belonged to no lungs and to every heavy, living tree in that place. "Evan," it said again, and then, so soft I might have made it up, "See you when you come back." I do tours in a different city now. When people ask me which places are worth their time, I give them the usual list and then I say, if you go to Savannah, go to Bonaventure, but don't go for the pretty pictures. Don't take anything. Don't leave anything you wouldn't give to a child. And if you hear a name that sounds like your name, don't assume it's coming from a mouth that moves. A week after Tessa went home, she texted me a photo of a note card pinned to a corkboard at her library. In her handwriting, "Don't sign." She didn't remember writing it. She wanted to know if I did. Sometimes I wake up at night because I hear the tiniest clink of coins and the room smells faintly like wet stone. It usually stops when I say I'm awake. Not every time. Once, it didn't stop for a long while, and I lay there in the dark listening to the shape of a word that wasn't a word yet, the space it would widen into if I let it. I don't know what it meant. I don't know who it belonged to. I don't want to find out under a locked gate with a man who smiles without showing his teeth. A month after everything happened, Marta forwarded me a voicemail that had come to the tour office by mistake. The transcription was a mess of question marks. The audio was mostly static, the kind that has weight. It was dated the night we'd been in the cemetery. In the middle, there was a sound like coins shifting and someone saying very ordinary, "Folks, Rivergate." And layered underneath that, not over but under my name, Tessa's, Jamal's. The way we say each other's names when we're lost in a crowd, maybe someone pranked us. Maybe there's a speaker hidden in the statue and a sensor that picks up when you lean in. Maybe Mr. Hargrave was a real man practicing the same lines so often they stopped sounding like words. But when I try to picture a person making those things happen, I end up back at the angel's mouth and the child's face, and the air between them that feels like a hallway, and the way sometimes a place learns your name and says it back to you in a voice that belongs to the moss and the river and the heat itself. If you go, bring water, wear real shoes, read the signs, and if you decide to lean in, and you will because that's what we do, keep your promises. Don't take a key you're not willing to return. Don't sign anything, even if it's just the space your name makes inside your own head when something else says it first. When you walk away, you'll want to look back. You'll want to see if the angel's mouth is open a little more than it was. You'll want to check that the penny is still standing on its edge. Don't pick a path. Hug the bluff. Ignore the first left, take the second. If you hear coins, let them fall where they want to fall. Let the voices belong to the place that keeps them. Later, you might wake to the sound of a ribbon brushing a stone in a room with no ribbons and no stones. You might hear your name shape itself like a coin choosing heads, choosing tails. If you do, tell it thanks and good night, and I'll come back when the air isn't so heavy. Then wait. The room will remember it's not a bluff above a river. The heat will remember it's not moss. The word will remember it isn't a word yet. And in the morning, you'll open your window and smell rain that hasn't happened and think, I'll go back someday, but not alone. And not after 5. I used to clock in at Hollywood Forever Cemetery for the graveyard shift, which is a funny sentence until you live it. I was 28, working 2 jobs to cover rent, and the cemetery gig sounded calmer than bartending myself into a herniated back. My title was Overnight Events Assistant, which meant clearing folding chairs after the movie nights, walking the grounds to make sure no one fell asleep on a mausoleum, and keeping an eye on the sprinklers so they didn't blast bouquets at 3 a.m. If you've never been, Hollywood Forever is wedged against Paramount, with planes scratching lines in the night and the glow of the city always hanging low, like the sky forgot how to go dark. There are peacocks that roam in the daytime and weirdly brazen cats at night. The place has a pulse to it. Cars on Melrose running like a slow river in the distance, the fountain burbling near the pond, an occasional coyote laughing on Santa Monica before it thinks better and disappears. I started in late summer. We'd had a run of small earthquakes that month, nothing dramatic, barely enough to rattle the streetlights. LA people are blasé about those. I had the early warning app like everybody else, but you ignore the push notifications until you don't. The first night I met Marisol, the overnight security guard. She stuck out her hand and said, "No heroics. You see someone, you call me. You hear something, you call me. You see me run, you run." Later we walked the south lawn where the new graves are. The sod there always looks too green, like it doesn't know where it is yet. She stopped near a fresh marker, still unsealed epoxy around the edges, the temporary plastic vase instead of a permanent bronze. You learn to spot the choreography of a new burial. Piles of turf plugs waiting to knit back together, the seam in the ground still visible if you know the angle to look. "Do you know about here?" she asked. "Should I?" I said. Marisol tapped the toe of her boot near the base of the stone. "I wasn't on that night. It was a while back. Not the big Ridgecrest one before you. We had a 3-something just before sunrise." The crew said the ground hiccuped. One of the groundskeepers heard scratching. She said it so casually I thought she was winding me up. "Like an animal?" I asked. She shrugged. "Like from inside. Banging. That's what they say." He swore the coffin was moving. By morning, quiet. He never came back. What, like he quit? Didn't pick up his check. Didn't even clock out, I think. People are like that. They burn 3 months of your time and then vanish. She kept walking. I stood there, palm flat on the wet grass without knowing why. The ground was cool. I felt the sprinkler heads under there, the grit of sand, the sponge of sod. Nothing else. For the first week, I kept telling myself that cemeteries were just parks with rules. People cried here, sure. People also picnicked and watched old movies. The worst I saw were drunk kids trying to etch their names into angels with car keys. I picked up a lot of broken votive candles. I started humming to myself when I walked alone, just to make the silence feel chosen. There were 3 of us on nights consistently. Me, Marisol, and Eddie, one of the grounds crew who took the late shift because he liked avoiding the heat. Eddie couldn't have been much older than me. He had this real careful way of moving, like he didn't trust the world to hold still if he didn't tiptoe. He knew every sprinkler zone by heart and could tell something was wrong with the pump by the way the pipe sounded 2 lawns away. "Don't stand on the seams," he told me. "The sod's like stitches. You step wrong, you pop them. Then I gotta come back and fix it." I stopped on a dime, embarrassed. "Sorry, it's okay," he said. "You're not heavy." He said it like he meant the grass, but I still don't know. The thing about working nights is your senses start turning up the volume on small things. A traffic cone blown over sounds like a fight. Wind through the eucalyptus sounds like whispering. You notice patterns. You notice when patterns break. It started as a little thing. Every time I passed that newer grave on the south lawn, the one Marisol had pointed to, I would find the flowers moved. Not kicked out or knocked down, just shifted, like someone had lifted the bouquet, rotated it a few inches, and set it back. The card with the family's message would be upside down one night, right side up the next. I'd correct it with the same little "there you go" voice I used on the lawnmower that rattled. "People come after hours sometimes," Marisol said when I told her. "They hop the fence. I catch them. I walk them out the front like it's a hotel. Maybe it's that. It's the same bouquet, though. You're new," she said. "You're going to think everything is something for a while." I decided she was probably right. The marker read, Lucero Hannah Marie, with the dates close enough together to still feel warm. 21. The kind of number your mouth doesn't know how to say and your eyes don't want to look at. The phrase "beloved daughter" under it. The little oval where a photo might go was empty. The second weird thing was the motion alerts. We had old cameras that I swear were held up with duct tape in places. They'd glitch, spasm, go to static, come back with the color weird. But where they watched that row, they kept pinging the system right around 2:15 a.m., 3 nights in a row. The clip would be nothing. A foxtail grass bending, a moth wing near the lens making it look like smoke. Eddie laughed and said, "It's the sprinklers. When the zone kicks on, the pressure shakes the stems. It's always at 15, that's when it cycles." He had a reason for everything. That's one of the reasons I liked him. He made the cemetery feel like a machine with rules. We were there when the earth decided to remind us that it was a machine too. I don't want to oversell it. If you weren't standing on grass, you might have missed it. My phone buzzed with the warning, "Earthquake detected, weak shaking expected." I read it and then I felt it, like someone had rolled a very heavy cart across the street behind me. The palms rattled. The pond shivered like a dog shaking off water just once. Somewhere a gate clanked. The 3 of us stood still without meaning to. "Grocery cart," Marisol said, which is how she described any quake that didn't make your knees knock. "We're good," I laughed. Eddie didn't. He was looking toward the south lawn, toward the newer row. He started walking. "The timer's cut on early," he said to me. "I gotta check they didn't short." He didn't wait for me, but I went anyway. The south lawn is a flat rectangle that feels like it goes on forever at night. The markers like teeth on a comb. The sprinklers were fine. I could hear them hissing 2 rows over. "What are you looking for?" I asked as I caught up to him. Eddie didn't answer. He was kneeling next to Hannah Lucero's grave, one palm flat like he was feeling for a fever. He tilted his head ear toward the grass. I wanted to make a joke. I opened my mouth. Then I heard it. There's insulated sound in this world. Sound transmitted through drywall, through a car trunk, through a winter jacket. You know it by instinct. This was like that. A small, steady scraping. Not loud, not frantic. The kind of sound that your brain sends to the front of the line because it's wrong. "Hello?" Eddie said. He said it quiet, like you'd say it through a door at a Motel 6 when someone knocks and you're not expecting anyone. We both crouched. I put my ear down. My cheek came away wet from the grass, and underneath there was something. A thump, another not quite rhythm. Not rhythm either. Pauses that felt like someone remembering how to count. "I'm calling 911, I said, and I didn't recognize my own voice. Marisol's radio crackled with my voice even before she got to us. Don't, she said, half running. "You can't do that. There's a procedure." "What procedure?" I asked too loud. "There's someone down there." "It's gas," she said, breathless. "Sometimes coffins build up gas. If the vault's loose, it can..." A scrape, closer, like metal on wood. "That's not gas," I didn't say. I heard my heartbeat in my teeth. We all went still. Eddie had his eyes closed and his hands spread out like he was trying to feel the words. He knocked back. 3 little taps on the grass with his knuckles. We froze again. It can't answer, I thought, like a prayer. It can't. 3 little taps came back slightly off, like someone trying to match a song they couldn't hear well. Marisol said, "Nope," and took several steps away from there in a row. I'm not proud of this. But I grabbed Eddie's sleeve because he was the only thing that made sense. He pulled his arm free gently without looking at me. He was listening with his whole face. Eddie knocked again, slower, tap. Tap, tap, silence, and then tap. Tap, she. Tap, okay, I said, which was not okay, but it's what came out. Marisol radioed the on-call funeral director, a guy named Caleb who wore a suit like he was born in it. His hair didn't move in the wind. He was weirdly awake at 2:40. He drove fast. I watched his headlights sliding along the mausoleum walls like searchlights. The scratching had changed. That's what I remember most. It went from fingers on wood to something softer on something harder. A palm sliding. Willie the cat, who I had never seen on that lawn at night, bolted across in a panic and vanished into a juniper bush. Caleb walked up briskly, held an iPad like a badge, and looked at us like we were a puzzle he'd solved before. He didn't kneel. He didn't touch the grass. Okay, let's get some clarity. There's someone down there, I said, not meaning to sound like I was pleading. He looked at his iPad. The burial was at 4 this afternoon. Sealed correctly, vault in place, permit on file. He glanced up. It's impossible. A hollow thud from below cut across the word impossible like the world was erasing letters. Caleb swallowed. We can't disturb a grave without a court order and family permission. That takes time. We also don't perform exhumations at this hour. What do you want me to tell the person down there? To wait until business hours? My voice was shaking now. I didn't care, no, he said soft. I want you not to assume your senses are giving you the whole picture. Settling happens. Gases, coffins shift. People hear things. Eddie knocked again, a different pattern. Tap, 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 nothing. Light wind moved across the lawn. We waited. Tap, tap, tap. That tiny lag again that suggested someone was far away and trying to find their way back to us with sound. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. He looked like a man trying to calculate an impossible thing into a number he could file. Then he squared up. I need you all to step back, he said. We'll bring out the ground mic to confirm vibration. I'll call the administrator. No one moved. Demolition crews use ground microphones sometimes to detect voids. We had one for checking on leaks near pipes. It was a less haunted reason to put your ear to the dirt. Eddie jogged to the shed to get it without Caleb asking. He came back with the case and a look like a man sleepwalking. He set the disc of the mic on the grass and clipped the headphones to it. He put them on. He didn't blink for a long time. He handed the headphones to me with hands that were shaking. It sounded like breathing. Not clear. Like there was cloth between the sound and me. A dry kind of inhale. A small, desperate exhale. The knocks felt like they were happening in a box the size of a person. Please, I said into nothing. I didn't mean to say the word. It climbed out of me anyway. Caleb's phone rang. He turned away. He talked like he was in church, voice low and clipped. Yes, I understand. We don't have authority. I can't. No. While he was on the phone, the ground shifted under my palm like something big sighing in sleep. The sprinkler head snapped on in the next zone with a hiss. The triple knock stopped. When the sprinklers cycle between zones, there's a few seconds where the pressure dips and surges. The pipe under us groaned. I held my breath, no sound. The mic picked up a long, quiet drag like wind in a vent. Are you there? I whispered. Nothing. Caleb hung up. He looked relieved to have orders. We're to secure the area. Family will be notified at a reasonable hour. We'll reassess in the morning. In the morning, I repeated because I needed to hear how ridiculous it sounded. We don't dig at night, he said. He looked past me instead of at me. There are reasons. The reason is you don't want to be here if whatever is making that noise stops, Marisol said. She folded her arms like she was hugging herself. Tell him the other reason. Caleb's nostrils flared almost invisibly. Years ago, he said, tone even, we had a false positive. Hard rain, loose vault. 4 men swore they heard knocking. We violated a grave. There was no one alive. The family sued. We had to explain to a judge why we believed a sound more than we believed paperwork. We do not violate graves at night anymore. We wait. We confirm. Then wait with us, I said. To his credit, he did. He laid his suit jacket over Willie's hedge and crouched an awkward crouch you do when your pants cost more than your car. He put his palm where ours had been. We stayed like that for an hour, I think. The app said there were aftershocks no one would feel. Somewhere a siren went by on Santa Monica and disappeared into another life. The grounds are big. The part we were on felt like it had shrunk to a circle the size of the stone and the three of us orbiting it. The sound didn't come back. Caleb used a tone I hated. "We'll take this up at 9. There will be coffee." Eddie didn't speak. He packed up the mic with too much neatness, like if he put the cables away right then the universe would accept that and reset. I didn't sleep when I got home. I kept hearing the knocks in the sink when I turned the water on, and in the stairwell when the neighbor went outside to smoke. I put a glass on the floor and leaned my ear to it like I was in a movie. I heard my own blood and my upstairs neighbor's cat purring. At 10:15 a.m., after a shower I didn't remember taking, I texted Marisol. "Anything?" She didn't answer. I called Eddie. It rang once and went straight to voicemail. His message was default robotic. He hadn't changed it. At noon I drove back even though I wasn't on the schedule. Daytime at the cemetery is like a reveal in a play. You see the backside of all the things you used to think were magic. Trucks. Guys in green shirts eating chips sitting on overturned buckets. People who thread fake flower stems into brass sleeves like they're threading needles. The south lawn looked normal. The sod around Hannah's grave was tamped with the little dimple pattern from a roller. The vase had a fresh bouquet in it. White roses with those green leaves that look waxed. The headstone was the same. The photo oval was still empty. I didn't understand why that hit me like a punch. There was a strip of blue tape at the corner like you'd put on a wall before you paint, and then there wasn't. A man I didn't know bent and peeled it slow like he was taking off a bandage. He didn't look at me. I found Caleb standing with two men in dress shirts. They were speaking calm, legal sentences. He saw me but pretended he didn't. I stood there anyway until he had to acknowledge my human presence. "What happened?" I asked. "We have no conclusive evidence that there was anyone alive in the grave," he said. "We followed procedure, which was," he took a breath. He recited, "We verified vault integrity, checked for leaks in the irrigation, contacted the family, and scheduled a site inspection. There is and was no indication of," he faltered. "We found nothing. You opened it." My voice came out like it had to push past something stuck. "No, there was no legal basis." "So what do I do with the sound in my head?" I asked, which I didn't plan to say out loud. He didn't have an answer because you can't have an answer to that. Marisol found me on a bench under a pine that spits sap if you stand in the wrong place. "He's gone," she said. "Who?" "Eddie, he didn't show." "He doesn't answer?" "His badge pings when you scan it, but it says inactive." "What does that mean?" "It means he did what the other guy did. He left." She didn't have to say the rest. The first guy, the one from the story, never came back after the scratching and the banging. The coffin had shaken from the inside, or so the story went. By morning, everything was quiet. The worker never returned to his job. It lived in the place between rumor and record, which is the part of your brain that doesn't let you sleep. The next week was a slow bleed of weird. The motion alerts kept pinging on the lawn. I stopped telling myself it was sprinklers and moths. A family set out a solar light that changed colors, and I watched it on camera at 1 a.m. switch off for a second, and then come back on like something passed in front of it, and there was no wind. On Tuesday, a man came to place a picture in the empty oval. He took the backing off and his hands trembled so badly I wanted to hold the edges for him. He slid in a smiling girl with dark hair and eyes that told on her for laughing a lot. As he pressed, the face fogged for a second like a breath from the wrong side. I stopped humming to myself at night. I started talking out loud just to make a human shape in the air. "Hey, it's me," I'd say to the lawn, ridiculous. "I'm just walking." On Wednesday, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't have saved. There was no message, just a voice memo, 30 seconds long. I sat on the curb near the fountain and hit play. Static, then shuffling, a breath, a knock, one, another, a pause like someone counting, 1, 1, 2, 3. The way Eddie had knocked, and then his voice far away like he was underwater. I still don't know if it was his voice. "Don't let them hear you." The hair stood up everywhere hair can stand up. I called the number back. It went to voicemail and said the mailbox wasn't set up. I texted Eddie and stared at my own name under the blue bubble like a stranger had picked up my phone. I didn't tell Marisol about the message. I can't explain that except to say that sometimes saying a thing changes what it is. Friday night, another grocery cart quake rolled through. I was on the north side by the mausoleum with the stained glass windows. Puddles ticked as if someone had dropped pebbles in them. The lights flickered once as if they weren't sure which world they wanted to belong to. I went to the south lawn without telling myself I was going there. At Hannah's grave, a new arrangement sat in the vase. White lilies now, the kind that smell like hospitals and grandmothers. The photo in the oval had a hairline crack across it, like someone had pressed too hard. The ground had settled more. That's normal. That's what ground does after a burial. You tamp it and it sinks and you tamp it again. Eddie would have said that in that gentle voice that made you believe things were fixable. I knelt. I put my palm down without meaning to. The grass was damp. The soil was cool. I waited for the ridiculous thing, the impossible thing to happen again. Knock. It was so faint I almost let my brain file it under pipe noise. Knock. Then nothing. Then three in quick succession as if to make a point. I didn't knock back. My hand hovered. I realized I was crying and didn't notice until the tear hit my wrist cold. What do you want? I asked the ground, like an insane person, and the sound that came up was not a noise I can explain in a way that would make you believe me. It was a sliding sound like a palm followed by a little creak like wood giving, then a long nothing that pressed against my ears like pressure in an airplane. The sprinkler zone 2 rows over kicked on. The lawn hissed. The knock stopped. A minute later, or 10, I don't know. Marisol's flashlight beam swept past me and then came back. "Hey," she said softly. "You can't keep doing that." "Doing what?" I asked. "Making yourself a door." I don't know how long we stood there. Eventually she said, "I've been thinking about the first guy. The one who left. Jesus, what was his name?" She snapped her fingers like names were flies. "He told me one thing before he left. He said once you hear it, you start to hear it other places." "Other places," I repeated. She nodded. "In pipes, in vents, in the elevator." He said, "It's not that you're hearing it where it is. It's that you made a space in your head where it fits." We both looked at the ground like it might answer back. I tried to quit. That's probably the part that makes this feel less like a story and more like a life. I needed the job. I told myself I could walk different routes, listen to podcasts, jam noise into my head to keep out the shape I'd made. The cemetery had other sections. I started volunteering to clean the chapel just to be inside walls. Then the noises followed me home. Not big, not dramatic. The old radiator in my studio tapped in threes like a kid practicing drum rudiments. The neighbor above me had a chair that she dragged across the floor at midnight in a pattern that made me lay awake, counting with my breath. On a Wednesday, I dropped my keys beside the bed, and when I leaned over to grab them, I heard something from the floor below my floor. A dull thump. Then another. Then another. I live over a storage space, so for a week I told myself it was boxes settling in a quake we didn't feel. Telling yourself things is like chewing gum. Your jaw gets tired and you still end up hungry. I texted Eddie again. "Where are you?" Then, "Please tell me you sent that message and you are at a campsite with no service and you are about to laugh at me." No answer. I blocked and unblocked the number, as if that did anything in the real world. On a Sunday, I went back to Hollywood forever on my day off like a moth to my own light. You don't get tickets to your own haunting, you just pay attention. Near Hannah's grave, there were 2 boys throwing a football where they shouldn't. Their mom told them to stop in a tired voice that said she understood that children don't understand forever yet. A man I recognized as the one who had put in the picture stood with his fingers on the stone. He had a notebook in his other hand and was writing something that looked a lot like someone making a list of things they could do instead of the thing they wanted to do more than anything. I waited until he left. I knelt, I listened. The ground said ground things. I knocked once and I hated myself for it. Because who the hell did I think I was, and where did I get the idea that any part of this belonged to me? Silence. Then the tiniest answering tap, and I don't honestly know if it was real or if it was my own bones making a sound I could live with. I think about the procedure a lot now, the paperwork that sits between you and an act of mercy, the reasons people have for not digging when the world says dig, the way the city hums like a big rolled-up rug and then snaps straight, knocking the water glasses on your table. We have rules for that. We have apps. I've told this story straight. I have not changed names because I don't think names are what make a story dangerous. I'm not asking anyone to do anything illegal. I'm not asking anyone to do anything at all. I'm just telling you that sometimes the earth makes a noise that sounds like someone asking, and sometimes the adults in the room tell you to wait until morning. And sometimes morning comes and there's no more sound to prove anything to anyone, and then you're the only one who still hears it. 2 nights ago, my building creaked like it was taking a breath. I woke up a full second before my phone blared the warning. Earthquake detected, weak shaking expected. A grocery cart rolled through my bed frame. The window groaned. The radiator tapped. I told myself all the stories I've learned to tell myself. Then something thumped from below my floor, directly below the center of my bed. 1, 2, 3. I put my hand flat on the hardwood. It was cool. Somewhere in there, pipes, joists, the slow breathing of a 100-year-old building. I knocked back because I'm not who I was before the cemetery, and because I guess I've decided there are worse things than being wrong. Nothing. The world held its breath. The aftershock passed through like a wave in a crowded pool. A car alarm chirped outside and gave up. No answering knocks. By morning, of course, everything was quiet. I didn't go into work last night. I didn't call. If you check the roster, you'll see my name. If you check my badge, it pings. If you stand on the south lawn and put your palm flat on the grass, you might hear nothing, or you might hear water in the lines. You might feel your heart beating in your fingertips. You might hear 3 small knocks, slightly off, like someone still trying to get the rhythm right. If you do, don't tell anyone, or do. But understand what it will cost you, because it costs something either way. If you answer, you should know the sound can follow floors and pipes and old wood and your own skull. You can make a space in your head without meaning to. It's not that the noise wants you, I don't think. It's that once you learn the shape of it, you give it a place to live. I still have the voice memo. I don't play it. I don't delete it. It sits there like the business card of someone you met once and hope to never need. Sometimes I hold my phone and feel like it's heavier where that message is. Sometimes, walking past the south lawn in daylight, because yes, I went back. Because you always go back until you don't. I pass a father showing his little boy how to read the names on the stones. He tells him that each one is a story. He doesn't tell him that some stories keep going after they're supposed to end. Why would he? Why would anyone? If you're reading this because you search for weird LA stories at 3 a.m., you can go. This is where it stops being a story you can solve. I can give you a place and a time and a name and the sound of 3 knocks in a rhythm that only ever almost lines up. That's it. That's all of it. You can call it gas and settling, and some days I'm grateful for that. You can call it superstition. You can tell me that even if I'd had a shovel at the right hour, even if the paper had said yes, even if the law had moved as fast as a human hand on wet grass, we would have found nothing to save. Maybe you're right, I'm not asking you to go there. I'm not asking you to lie down on the ground and put your ear to the earth and make a door with your hand. I'm not asking you to do what Eddie did. I'm not asking you to disappear the way he did. I'm telling you I know now, the way you know when you've already made a choice, that if the ground ever talks to me like that again, it won't matter who is watching or what the policy is, or how stupid I will look with a shovel in my hands at 3 in the morning. It won't matter that the sound might be nothing but the beating of my own blood. It won't matter if morning makes me a liar. I'll dig, or I'll knock, or I'll put my face to the earth and spend whatever is left of my life learning its language, stupid and tender and wrong. Maybe the ground will tell me a word back. Maybe that's worse. Last night my phone buzzed with a number I don't know. 1 ring. No voicemail, no text. I put it face down on the table. After a time, after my apartment forgot that it had shaken, after the old wood settled and the pipe stopped ticking, I lay down and listened hard enough that my jaw hurt. From somewhere I could not map on any floor plan. Far away and too close, I heard the muffled sound of someone tapping on a lid they didn't choose, trying their best to match the beat of a heart they could almost hear. Tap, tap, tap. I'm not posting this for internet points. I'm posting it because every once in a while, right around midnight, someone knocks on my door 3 times, and when I look through the peephole, the hallway is empty. I've moved twice since this happened. It still finds me. This started in late August, a few summers ago, back when we all still thought we were invincible and Brooklyn was just a big backyard you could cut through. I was 19, working the closing shift at a deli on 5th Avenue not far from the Gothic gates of Greenwood. If you've never been, it's huge. Rolling hills, old trees, statues that look like they're judging you. During the day, it's beautiful, quiet, respectful. At night, it's a different place entirely. The city noise blurs out and it feels like you're listening to a station between channels. There's always some sound, but you can't say exactly what it is. I hung around with 3 people that summer: my cousin Danny, our friend Luis, and Jonah, who I'd known since middle school. We were the ones who stayed local for school or work and didn't run off to Boston or California. We filled our evenings with dumb dares, walk and talks, bodega coffees at midnight. So when Luis told us about a neighborhood dare where you knock 3 times on a particular mausoleum door in Greenwood, and sometimes it knocks back, we shrugged like, okay, sure. The extra detail, the one that stuck under my skin, was the whisper. Supposedly, after the knocks, you'll hear a voice call your name. Your name, not hey, not hello, but you personally. And if it knew you, maybe it could follow you. I should have laughed it off. But I was the one who said, tonight? The plan was quick. I was getting off at 11:30. We'd meet at the deli, grab sandwiches for courage, hop the low section of fence by 24th Street. Everyone knows at least one easy spot, and find the mausoleum. According to Luis, it was halfway up a hill near one of the ponds with a bronze ring on the door. That's vague, but Greenwood at night shrinks. You stop thinking in street grids. Paths become letters you can't read. We figured we'd walk until we saw something that looked right. Young brains are confident like that. We met as planned. Danny had her hair in a bun and a flashlight that was more keychain than tool. Jonah wore a hoodie even though the air was thick. Luis had the kind of grin that tells you he's going to act fine, and then shove you at the last second. We ate, talked big, warned each other about being respectful because we were in a cemetery, not a playground. We meant it too. It wasn't about disrespect. It was about testing a fence to see if it would hold. I remember exactly how it felt to swing a leg over the fence and drop onto the other side. The heat was still in the iron. My shoes landed in the kind of grass that's been watered by humidity, not sprinklers. The path in front of us was pale in the thin light, and the city behind us felt like a door we'd let swing closed. You know those green parrots that nest above Greenwood's main gate? They were quiet. That's not spooky on its own, but it was one of those details that clung in my head. Like the spotlights on the gate that flicker sometimes, or the way traffic hums differently when it's very late. The world had softened and we were inside it like something folded into dough. We moved slow. The flashlight made a small circle that jumped with each step. The graves we passed were mostly flat markers at first, then the older stones, then the little family plots with iron fences that look fragile until you touch them. The mausoleums appeared as shadows ahead, then became shapes, each with its own name and design. Some had stained glass windows. Some had detailed doors. Some were plain, just stone and a name. Danny said, "We shouldn't go in even if it's open." No one argued. We weren't those kids. The dare was the door knock, nothing more. I told myself that knocking was like a question in any language. We'd knock, wait, and answer if someone, anyone, answered back. We were halfway up a hill with the city skyline peeking through branches when we found it. The mausoleum we chose had a pair of low steps, a stone lintel with a family name I won't write here. You could find it if you tried. I'm not trying to get anyone hurt. And yeah, a bronze ring fixed through a lion's mouth. The ring had the polished look of something touched by a lot of hands, even though nobody should be touching it. Luis exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for the whole walk. "That's the one?" "Could be any of them," Jonah said. He was trying to sound unimpressed, but I could hear the wobble in it. Danny shone the flashlight around while I stepped up. The stone was cool under my palm. The door didn't have a keyhole, just seams. There was a fresh bouquet in one of the holders, like someone still came. It reminded me there were people attached to this space, not just names on a dare. "Last chance to back out," I said, and meant it. I'm not ashamed to admit I had a weird feeling standing there. Not fear exactly, but the sense that we had stepped onto a stage and somebody had already pulled back the curtain. No one backed out. Wrapped my fingers through the bronze ring and lifted it just enough to let it fall. Knock. A hollow sound. Not loud, not like the door of a house, but a neat contained noise that felt like it was measured in inches. I did it again. Knock. Danny's light shook a little. I did it a third time. Knock. We stood there, 4 idiots holding our breath. Nothing happened. A breeze moved up the hill and rattled leaves. Somewhere out on the street, a bus let out that sigh they do when the doors close. My phone buzzed, a spam email from a store I don't shop at, and I nearly threw it. We all laughed because we needed to. "Okay," Louis said. "One more set." "That's the dare, right?" 3 knocks at midnight. What time is it? Danny asked. Jonah checked his watch. It's 12:03. He held it out. The face said 11:59, then flicked to 12:03, then back to 12:01. He frowned, shook his wrist. It's busted. I lifted the ring again. Knock. It felt heavier all of a sudden. Knock. Someone whispered, "Wait," and I thought it was Danny. But when I looked, she was biting her lip and not talking. I almost didn't do the third, but that of course made me do it. Knock. We waited. The sound that came back wasn't an obvious knock. It was a low, dull thud like something heavy settling. Then after a pause long enough to make me think I imagined it, 3 very faint knocks from inside the door. They weren't loud. They weren't dramatic, but they were timed. Not echoes. Not the ring slipping back into place. 3 separate taps, tap, tap, tap. Who's there? Luis blurted. You could hear the hope in his voice that there was some nighttime groundskeeper inside, or a person who could end this with a lecture. No one answered. The light picked up a moth doing drunken circles. In the corner of my eye, down by the steps, something darker than shadow changed shape. I aimed the flashlight and only saw stone. Do you hear voices? Danny asked. I didn't, not then. I just heard the kind of quiet you get when your ears strain so hard your own blood becomes loud. Hello? I said, stupid, but what else do you say? That's when the whisper happened. It was close, like someone had leaned over my shoulder without making any air move. I can write exactly what it said, but I'm already jumpy typing it. Alex. I jerked around so fast I almost fell off the steps. Danny caught my arm. What? She said, you didn't? I couldn't finish the sentence. I could still feel where my name had touched the edge of my ear. When I think about it now, the freakiest part is that it didn't sound like a stranger. It sounded like the way my name sounds when someone who knows me well says it. Not the voice exactly, but the cadence, like it already knew what I would turn into. Luis was shaking his head. I heard something, but... Say your name, Jonah blurted. All of us. If it says it back... No, Danny said, quick and sharp. Don't give it anything. She meant it as a joke, I think, but also not. We stood there arguing in whispers like idiots negotiating with the ocean. And then the bronze ring twitched in my hand. Not because my hand moved. I was holding it too tight for that. It moved under my grip like something on the other side had grasped it from within. I didn't drop it. That would have made sense. Instead, I did what stupid, scared people do. I lifted the ring again and knocked 3 more times because my brain was trying to make this fit a pattern. Knock, knock, knock. The answers came faster. Tap, tap, tap. Angry, playful. It's weird how much you can read into a noise when you want to assign intention. Jonah swallowed. We should go, he said. The door exhaled. I don't know how else to put it. A thin draft came through the seam down the middle, like the pressure inside had changed. The air that touched us smelled cold and damp, like coins and old flowers. It didn't belong to August. Then the whisper again, except this time it didn't go to just me. We all heard it. Alex. Clear. Soft, like it had decided I was the one worth saying. I stepped back onto the path and the ring dropped from my fingers as if a magnet had been shut off. It hit the plate and gave off this tiny bell tone that rolled out and got strange as it traveled, like listening to a bell underwater. Okay, Danny said, steadying her voice. We're done, we did it. We can say we did it. Wait, Louise said. What if we... He didn't finish that either because there was a light moving through the trees downhill. A flashlight. A beam swinging through low branches. It was far enough that it didn't hit us, but close enough that if someone looked up, they could see shapes where no shapes should be. We switched off our light and backed into the shadow of the mausoleum. The new beam bobbed, paused, and then kept moving parallel to the path like whoever was holding it was looking for something, but not expecting to find us. There was no radio chatter, no sound of shoes on gravel, just that beam like an eye that couldn't focus, Jonah whispered. Is that a guard? But no one answered because the light passed behind another mausoleum and went out, like it had rounded a corner that wasn't there. All at once the quiet got thicker. The next voice we heard came from behind us and above us like someone was standing a few feet up the hill we'd already looked at. It said, "Don't give it your name." The voice was low, a man's, rough like someone who smoked too much. I spun the flashlight up and caught a person standing among the stones. An older guy, maybe 50s, maybe 70s, some people wear the years differently. Work jacket, cap, He had a ring of keys hanging from his belt that flashed when the light went over them. His face was lined like the bark of the big trees around us. "Sir," I started. "Don't," he said again, and this time he looked at me like I'd left a door open in winter. "Did you knock?" No point lying. "Yes," I said. He nodded once like he'd expected that. "Go out the way you came in," he said. "No shortcuts. Don't turn around if you hear anyone. They'll be at your shoulder until you do." Danny started to apologize and explain and promise things we had no right to promise. The man lifted a hand. "Just go." He walked past us and laid his palm against the door like you'd lay a hand on a sleeping dog. "They're quiet if you don't feed them," he said, not to us. "There's a certain tone adults get when they're done entertaining your questions." We obeyed it. We turned and walked down the path the way we'd come. It was simple. Just retrace your steps. Left where a low iron fence had that missing post. Right at the cedar that shed a smell like pencil shavings. Except it wasn't simple. We rounded the cedar and found a fork we didn't remember. We took the left and came out at a pond that should have been on the other side of a hill. We doubled back and clipped a different path and reached the gothic fiction version of a cul-de-sac. 2 mausoleums facing each other like they were having a staring contest. The flashlight circle kept finding names that acted like they had been slightly rearranged. It wasn't a puzzle. It was a feeling. Whichever way we turned felt wrong. "Stop," Danny said finally. "Stop moving. We're making it worse." We stood in a little cluster and listened to nothing. The night was a room with a window and no door. My heart wanted a conversation it could understand, a car, a plane, anything, and got none of it. Then came the knocks. Not from a door this time. From the path behind us. 3 soft taps in the gravel. Exactly like the earlier knocks in rhythm and space. My whole body told me to turn around. I thought of the old man's keys and his hand on the bronze ring. "Don't turn around," I whispered, and felt stupid saying it and said it anyway. 3 more taps, closer. "Follow me," Louis said, "and I'll give him this." He sounded braver than he felt. He pointed the light low so it wouldn't bounce, picked the path that looked the least like every other path and started walking. We followed tight. The gravel hissed under our sneakers. The taps kept coming, never quite catching us, like something was testing the size of the step between us. The hum of the city got faintly louder, and then faintly softer in that way where it's almost not the city. I could see the faint geometry of the fence through trees and thought I'd never loved chain link more. We reached it, found the same bend, and climbed like kids at a pool who've been told twice it's closing. I don't remember the landing on the street side. Only the feel of the sidewalk giving back heat and the sudden familiarity of cars existing, and someone's radio playing an old salsa song. I turned around, I'll admit it, after my feet hit the sidewalk. I turned to see if anyone else would climb, if the older guy was behind us, anything. The hill was dark and still. Then the tap sounded once, just 3 tap, tap, tap from the other side of the fence in a row with no space between, like punctuation. I flinched back so hard I hit the curb. We didn't really talk on the walk back. Everybody has that one silence with friends where you're all thinking exactly the same thing, and you cannot say it yet, because if you say it, you have to carry it. We split up at the deli with nods that meant, "See you tomorrow," and "Please don't call me tonight" at the same time. I wish I could tell you it ended there. That the dare was the dare and the fear was the fear and the night went back to being the night. But at 12:21 a.m., right as I was brushing my teeth and trying not to look at the mirror because the mirror felt like a portal to the version of my face that didn't get to leave, someone knocked on my apartment door, 3 times, not loud. The exact shape of the knocks we had heard against the mausoleum door and the gravel in the air. I froze with toothpaste in my mouth and that electric taste you get when a filling touches aluminum. My roommate was out. The hallway was empty when I checked around 10 p.m. I'd taken out the trash and nodded at Mrs. Alvarez downstairs, and she told me I looked tired. No one would be knocking, not then. But they did. I opened the peephole with the softest click and looked out into the orange staircase light. The hall was empty. The knocks came again, closer this time, which is a stupid thing to say because they were on my door, but I mean sonically closer, like the space between the sounds had shrunk. Tap, tap, tap. Something brushed the other side of the door, a sound like cloth against wood. I put my palm to the door the way the groundskeeper had to the mausoleum, because that's what my brain offered. The wood was cool. No one spoke. No whisper. After about a minute, something like the sound of a person stepping back and then nothing. I waited 5 minutes before I took my hand down. The skin of my palm felt like it had frost on it. I didn't sleep until it was almost light and the birds started yelling like birds. I kept replaying everything. The ring in my hand moving a fraction. The old man's voice. The way the paths didn't behave. The whisper of my name. I decided the door was it. That was the last move. Whatever it was, had knocked on my door as a calling card, and if I ignored it, it would get bored and go back to being a rumor. The next day we met at the deli. That was the plan anyway. The meet and tell jokes about how not scared you were plan. Everyone showed except Jonah, who texted, feeling weird. Later, with no punctuation, we traded what had happened after we separated. Danny. Nothing. But she'd slept with her TV on and woke up to find it paused on a blue screen like somebody had hit stop at midnight exactly. Luis. His phone alarm went off at 12 a.m. even though he hadn't said anything. And when he went to shut it off, his home screen wallpaper had switched to a pitch-black image that only showed a faint, blurry circle if you tilted it. I told them about the knocks. We all decided not to tell Jonah that part. We also decided to go back in daylight. I know. It sounds like the thing you yell at a screen not to do, but I had this hard-headed idea that daylight is disinfectant. If we could stand there at noon and see how everything was normal, we'd be free of the night's weird logic. We'd take photos of the mausoleum, see other people around, find the old guy and say thank you and move on. We went around 3 in the afternoon. Everything looked like it had been dipped in extra clarity. The parakeets above the main gate yelled at us like we owed them money. There were tourists taking pictures and a couple sitting under a tree, their shoulders touching in a way that made me feel happy for them and then mad at myself for feeling anything sentimental in that place after the night before. We walked the same route we thought we had taken and found the mausoleum easily. In full sun it was just stone. Just a door. The ring was there, still polished. The name above the lintel was ordinary in a way that felt intentional now. The only new thing was a broken white candle at the base with wax melted into the grass. I didn't remember it from last night. That didn't mean much. While we were standing there, an older man walked up the path toward us. Same jacket, same cap. "It's you," I said before my nerves caught up. He looked at us like we were a pile of plastic bags caught in a bush. Not kindly, not unkindly, just like a weather pattern he had seen before and would see again. "Thank you," Danny said, "for last night." Don't thank me," he said. He wasn't looking around to see if anyone else was listening. He was the type of person who had no audience and didn't need one. Just don't come back at night. It doesn't matter if you believe in it. It believes in you. I asked him if he worked there. "Work," he said. "I used to. Sometimes I still walk." He tapped the keys on his belt. They didn't look like real keys, not all of them. They were old brass in shapes I didn't recognize. "People have always knocked," he said. "Sometimes it answers. You got lucky. It noticed only one of you." "It said his name," Luis said, nodding at me. The old man looked at me with a tired sympathy that made my stomach hurt. "Listen to me," he said. "If you hear it, don't talk back. Don't say your name even in your head." "In my head?" I said, half laughing because that sounded like telling me not to imagine an elephant. He didn't laugh. "You know where to find a mirror?" he said. "Good, don't look in one at midnight. It's a door either way, but it likes doors that show you as you are." He walked off then, like we'd interrupted a loop he was destined to walk no matter what. We watched him go up the path until the branches took him. We stood for a while in the shade of somebody else's great-great-grandparents and didn't knock. That night I didn't get 3 knocks. I got one. A single, dull, thoughtful knock at exactly 12 a.m. My phone, which I had placed face down, lit up with a new voice memo I hadn't recorded. The title was just the timestamp. I didn't hit play for a full minute. When I finally did, there was a hiss like quiet recorded too loud. Then 3 soft taps, then clear as your own thought. My name. If you're thinking this is easy to fake, I agree. If you're thinking I probably faked it for myself, maybe you're right. Maybe I held my phone up to my own door earlier to see what would happen without meaning to, like testing a bruise. But I can tell you the file length was 021, and the name sounded like a person who knew what was in my kitchen drawers. This went on for a while. Not every night. That almost made it worse. You can steel yourself for a routine. You can't steel yourself for chaos. Sometimes 3 knocks at 12:19, sometimes 1 at 12:00, sometimes a whisper right as I was falling asleep with no knocks at all. Twice I heard my name from the elevator at the end of the hall in a voice like someone's mouth pressed against metal. Once I woke up to find my bathroom mirror fogged like someone had been breathing on it. I don't have a radiator in there. It only fogs when I take a hot shower. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself we'd been primed by a story. A dare, a man with odd keys and the pressure of a summer that felt like the last summer. I told myself a lot of very rational things. That's what rational people do when they're scared. We tried to loop Jonah back in. He stopped answering entirely. He ghosted our group chat for days. Finally, he messaged, "I'm good. Just don't text me after 11. That was it. No emojis. When we saw him a week later at a cookout in Sunset Park, he kept checking the time even during the day, like there was a countdown running in his head. He wouldn't talk about the cemetery at all, like the word itself was a tongue twister. Then he moved out to stay with his aunt in Queens for a while. I didn't blame him. I don't know if it helped. There isn't a spectacular and then here. No bloody handprints. No exorcism. Nothing you could put in a movie trailer. That's part of what makes it so hard to shake. It's quiet. It knows when you're looking. It waits until you forget the rules and whisper your own name to yourself. It waits until you glance at a mirror at exactly the wrong second. It waits until you can't remember whether the knock came from the door or the wall or the inside of your skull. It's patient in a way that people aren't. It's invested in time. I see the old man sometimes. Not often. You can sit on a bench on a sunny day and watch a funeral procession take the road up the hill. And if you squint through leaves, you'll swear you see a cap and jacket cross a path farther up. I nodded at him once outside the cemetery, on the sidewalk near a florist. He nodded back without surprise, like he knew where we'd each be walking years before we walked there. I wanted to ask him a dozen questions. Did you give someone your name? Does it ever leave you? But the florist came out with an arrangement in a paper sleeve and the street got loud again and the moment was gone. Maybe that's a kindness. Not every question needs its end pinned to the page. The last time I heard the knocks, I was staying with my sister in a building with doors so heavy you could dislocate something if you weren't careful. I had decided I was done being the main character of this story. I didn't tell my sister because she would have told me to sleep with a Bible under my pillow, and that's not how I'm built. It was a Wednesday. We had watched a show. We had laughed at nothing. I went to the bathroom around midnight and stared at the stupid cabinet mirror that never quite sits flush. I remembered the old man saying not to look, and because I am who I am, I looked anyway. Not dramatically, not on purpose. Just a human glance at your own face in passing. The glass showed me my eyes and the shape of my mouth and my hair doing its hair thing. It showed me utterly boring. Then behind my face, in the blur that a mirror makes of your doorway when it's out of focus, something shifted. Not a figure, not a shadow, just the kind of dark that learns a shape. I shut the cabinet. I told myself out loud that I was not available for this. I went to the living room and turned the TV on to some stupid show. At exactly 12 and 3 knocks landed on the door. My sister shouted from her room, half asleep, "Who is that?" I said I didn't know and didn't move. We waited. The knocks didn't come again. The TV screen showed a commercial for a pill that fixes a thing you didn't know your body did. The sound was too low for me to understand any of the words. I'm writing this because someone asked me the other day if I'd done any cool New York stuff, and it made me think of how easy it is to put a place into a list: museums, pizza, rooftops with a view. A cemetery where if you knock on a door too late at night, something knocks back. It's all cool until you can't separate the place from the sound it gave you. And I guess I'm writing it because if you're local and your friends dare you to knock, you'll feel that dumb pull to prove you're not scared of a door. I can tell you as someone who has made a lot of dumb pulls in his life. Nothing cares less about your bravery than a door that'd like to be a mouth. If you go anyway, and you shouldn't, be quiet. Be respectful. Don't say your name, not out loud, not in your head. Don't turn around if you hear the steps. Go out the way you came in. Pretend the old man with the keys is watching from a shade you can't see because maybe he is. And if you make it home and you hear 3 knocks after midnight, don't open the door and don't talk to it and don't press your hand to the wood. Listen to the silence that comes after. Tell yourself it's apartment noise or a prank or a compressor down the hall. It might be. I hope it is. But if you press your hand to it, you'll feel how cold it is, and that cold will learn your pulse, and that will be that. I still walk by Greenwood sometimes in the late afternoon, on my way home from the deli or a friend's place, and I stand across from the gate for a minute and watch the light spill through the trees. The parrots squabble. People go in with flowers and come out with their eyes a little red. The stone looks like stone. The air smells like cut grass and city. It's almost enough to make me think we made a story out of a windy night and a creaky hinge and an old guy who liked to scare kids. And then, right as that comforting thought settles, a bus pulls up, sighs, and I hear it again under every other sound in the world. Soft and patient. The shape of my own name. I do what I've learned to do. I keep walking. I don't look at the reflection in the storefront, and I remind myself that some doors never stop waiting. Once you show them, you know where they are.